But those do not change the
But
intent.
no, I knew someone with the last name Rounds.
Yes,
That's why.
so that's in the genealogy there somewhere. There are a lot of,
Okay, we'll have a good meeting. Thank you.
thank you.
Is this, Dexter? Yeah.
Put my cord out of the way.
I don't know,
Uh,
I don't think I'll plug in. I'll just see how far I get.
When you die, we'll go home.
That's,
what time, Greg?
I'm thinking it's 7 P.M.
Okay, because we've got, that effective meeting
Oh, right,
principles,
right,
that means that I'm gonna do 2 to 4.
No, but you don't.
And then we have the select board hours from 5:30 to 6:30. So I could do that. Should we check if anybody out? There goes one. It is a lot, but we gotta get it done. And we're here anyway for those.
Unfortunately, the lawyer wasn't available. 17th, which is what we were shooting for originally.
I could do that. If we do 7 o'clock,
I think that's the-
yeah. Do we do, November 10th, and I can do that now. No, I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure of sitting on a dog hearing.
oh, I heard something about that.
No.
So,
Well,
you know what I'll do? I'll
we can
go,
talk about scheduling.
I'll go do emails, but if everybody, I know that Ann and I are planning on doing the 2 to 4, effective management.
That training thing, yeah, I'm planning on that. That's in my.
Yeah,
Yes.
that'd be really good.
I'll be down for 2 to 4. We'll do it.
There's 2 to 4 and what, 7 to 9 or something?
And well, then we have the, yeah, in the morning, they have 2, right, 10 to 12 and 2 to 4. I
Yes.
think it was. And
Okay.
then, Seaside, oh shoot, all right, we'll get started. I'll text you all, I mean, email, and we can, and as long as nobody deliberates. Okay. Got me muted. Okay.
Oh, I didn't. Didn't get the email.
What do you mean, which one?
Oh,
Is that something we should have?
This is what Gregson had to do.
This, the draft, the
Yeah.
strategic goal, the, yeah.
I've got copies of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, I think yeah, this is what I got on.
We got it on.
Yeah, my head is tired. Okay. I'd like to call to order the select board special meeting on Thursday, October 20th. We are in room 7 and Zoom as well. So the meeting is being recorded by Zoom and call to order, roll call vote. Kathy Bellata. John Round.
Here.
Tony Policy.
Here.
And Harrison here. And Becky J. We're all here. Okay, so first on is approval of the minutes of October 3rd. Motion to approve, please.
Motion to approve meeting minutes from October 3rd.
Second,
Moved by Kathy Bellata, seconded by John Round. Roll call vote. Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Round.
yes.
Brian Solace.
Yes.
Ann Harrison. Abstain. And Becky Jakes says yes. That's 4 yes, 1 abstention. Okay, moving right along to continued discussion of strategic goals and action steps. Right. And we have Susan Beckman, who's with us via Zoom, who is helping us out with this. Greg, do you want to start this or?
Actually, if you like, so it's providing some draft summarizing the five strategic goals that you identified, the last couple of workshops. And then have added to that then some possible action steps under each one. We set the recommendations, I added some, we have added some Kathy. You know, the appropriate headings. So you have a running list of possibilities for each of them. I'm sure there are more that we can think of. We have 2 million some, so we could have a discussion, you know, section by section. What you think is appropriate, and how we can best identify what the key action steps are, and how we can keep ourselves focused so that we can get them accomplished, which tends to be the biggest challenge.
Right.
Lots of distractions always come along the way, and it's putting out the fires of the day always get in the way. So the first one, advancing the confidence and credibility of town governance. We talked about reaching out to the community and engaging more through your conversation corners, holding office hours, having a presence at town events. And you talked also, in addition to that, you talked about some sort of a listening for having more informal gatherings, maybe 1 or 2 of you around the coffee table for dessert and conversation in the neighborhood. One idea that's been picked around. So again, I think it'd be helpful to sort of brainstorm on the action steps and then try to narrow down the list and put a little more detail as to what it means to carry out those steps.
Why don't we, so that we can be most efficient with this, why don't we each go around and so we're not interrupting and let each person kind of give some thoughts to 1 through 6 of these. We won't go down into the letters yet. But let's start with number 1, 1-1. Kathy, do you want to start off and go down? And
Just let me say, so the 1 through 6 were mine in those lowercase Roman numerals, and then Anne's were the A, B, C, D's, and then Kathy's were 1 and 2. So that follows. That follows through.
And what I would say in relation to those, the 1 through 6, we discussed those. So we've all kind of added some ideas, for example, on 2, under number 1, Roman number 2 or lowercase. The template, Kathy was going to work on that regarding the heart and soul. That we were going to do kind of Orton Foundation, and you were going to get us some information on that. Is that right?
You sent us a link.
I think I gave you a link.
Didn't work.
Didn't work?
No, I remember you sent that out, I don't know, maybe in August.
Yes. Yeah.
Didn't work then, and then kind of going through everything over the last few days, I tried it again,
Still didn't work.
and no, it brings you to YouTube in general. But not that specifically. So I guess no one has looked at that.
Not I. And that's where, you know, we, as opposed to leaving it loose-ended, I think this is to what Kathy's been saying, and what I've heard other people say is that a place where we can say what it is we've done when it was done, for us to use, perhaps. I don't know if that's something that we want.
I'm sorry,
online.
I lost thread here. What is it we want or don't want?
Talking about what the goals are and actually taking action.
So,
For
no, you were specifically, you went into Heart and Soul, which I got, and then. I lost it.
the Orton Foundation that is
Orton
Greg had talked
Foundation.
about,
And then,
and you were gonna get the link, Greg sent it out. I don't recall getting it, but that's me, I'm sure. And just that rather than having a link sent out and we don't revisit it, we actually do. We have something to say that, or some kind of a check. Yes, got the link live, you went to it and read it. Okay. Anyway, so Kathy, back to you.
So just a process check, because this particular topic is governance, I was initially a little bit unclear as to, because I have some action items here, which I started to do, but then I stopped once Susan became engaged on the governance project. So I think one thing we want to get clear on this particular goal is who's taking the lead on what. I don't want to duplicate effort. So that's just one thought I had off the bat. Then the second thing that I did was when I looked at all these, I found a lot of alignment. So I kind of identified duplicate goals that may just be phrased differently. So for example, and then other things I think are just go-dos. So that's how I'm gonna talk to it. So I think our resulting goals should be things that we strive to achieve. But if there's some just go-dos, then that is where a follow-up chart, tracking what the actions are and following up, I think are very appropriate. So I think everything here is great. I'm just not sure it needs to be in our goals, because from my perspective, some things maybe just go-dos. So an example is like the first two, the heart and soul, and the template for agenda topic. Those I think are just go-dos if we're all in agreement that that's what we want to do. I think that's fantastic. The formation of an executive team of department leaders. I
That's
think
really mine.
that is
Mine.
yours, Greg. I think that belongs on your goals. I don't think that's something the board needs to
No, I
spend its time on. So then we get down to your number 4, the aligned goals of the master plan. I saw that as duplicate with what I had down below. The number 1, G2, it's just worded differently, and I like the way you worded that, so totally fine with that. The next one you had, number 5, revamp policy on correspondence. For anything that we take on as a goal, I just think we need to discuss what does success look like. Either it's something we're measuring, or we can just clearly articulate something that signifies when we're done. So as far as number 5, I'm unclear what we're trying to do with that, or what the end state looks like. Number 6, continue to upgrade town website, 100% agree with that. I think that's a just go do from the town operations. I'm certainly happy to help and if you need it, but I don't know that the board needs to take that on. I think that's just good town operations, and I love it. So out of those, if you just want to stop with those 6, then I think the one that is a board goal is number 4, possibly number 5. I'm just not clear on what that is.
For 5, I think Ann and I had agreed that that would fall into the policy realm.
Okay.
And we were gonna undertake that. Is that correct, Ann? I think we're gonna put together a communications
I
policy.
don't know that a policy is our goal. Having communications work better and having people in town feel that they're heard is the goal. The policy is a step toward that, and I'd be happy to.
And maybe it was correspondence. Maybe it was a subset of that.
We did talk about that.
Okay, so maybe it was more correspondence than communication, but I know there was a question of, okay, an email comes in fact, that's down there. Where is it? C.
Mhm.
Publish correspondence and responses. Well, are we or are we not? What's the policy going to be?
A, B, and C are all in that range.
Yeah, okay, so we need to decide. And I mean, we should draft something and then put it down in front of everybody and say, all right.
Perhaps we should ask what people think would be a good policy before we.
Can we just go through these
Yeah.
and then come back for now? I mean, I don't want us to get hung up on
No,
one
not the
thing
details.
without addressing.
We don't have to figure out how we're going to do it right now. We just want to figure out which ones we want to do to work on.
Yeah, so anyway, so communication / correspondence, that's something that we need to work on as a policy issue. Okay, so we'll do that downstream. I think that most of the other things Kathy has addressed. Number 6, upgrade the town website. I think that's something that is always going. And to be honest, I think it's pretty good now. I mean, in terms of projects, if you want to know what things stand, I'm not saying they're always all of them are up to date.
No.
But it's like, you want to know what's going on in town, you can go there, bing, 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 every single department, you see what the projects are. So I think that that's laid out pretty well. There just needs to be diligence and keeping that update. The other things, yeah, I just have to get something, this heart and soul thing, just get something to us that works great.
Yes, yeah, I don't like that at all.
That's all, that's fine. But I don't have any other comments on that. Kathy summarized most of that pretty well.
Brian?
I think it's been articulated pretty well. I do agree. Item 1, I think we've been endeavoring to try and do this better and just continue. Again, heart and soul, nothing with that, but just getting out and about is prime importance. Again, Greg, you have the formation of the executive team, that would be all on you.
Yeah.
And we can do to support that, I'm sure, it's fine. And yeah, as far as policy on correspondence, just matter with this kind of policy that just you have to respond. I think it's simple enough. So those 6 items there, I'm good.
And
I am a little confused with what the work plans for the departments seem to be kind of a department specific sort of thing. And I'm not sure which, for example, I guess, how does Parks and Recs, what goal should Parks and Rec have to meet these goals? It just, we're talking about goals for, Kathy, you had an answer.
Go ahead, keep, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I actually asked a question.
Okay, so the committees, just my opinion, should exist to support the town government in some way. If they are sanctioned, I think Brian used the term last week, on Monday, sanctioned by the town, and if they're gonna pull on town resources for posting of minutes, posting of meetings, all that stuff, if they're gonna be sanctioned by the town, my thinking is they just have to be very clear on their purpose. And if the select board sets priorities, then we want to make sure we're tapping those committees to help us achieve those priorities for the town. So, for example, we just talked about it on Monday night, the harbor committee, right, the harbor advisory committee. If we go forward with a master plan for the harbor, the board should set some very specific go-dos for that committee. They will figure out how to make it happen, but we should be very clear on what the expectations are and when they're done with that and can go back on. So that's one example of getting a committee to.
There are examples, but there are also trying to force every function of the town into these goals doesn't strike me as
Yeah,
being
no, that's not what I'm trying to do.
and that's what this more or less says.
I read that the way Greg worded it as align. So for example, alignment to me means no committee is doing something that's contrary, for example, to what we have in the master plan or our goals or et cetera, and it's up to us to provide some oversight.
I'm sure there are some committees that are completely orthogonal.
Or what?
Orthogonal.
So could you educate me what's an
One
example
is,
of that?
welcome to Manchester.
So do they pull on town resources or
Not particularly.
do we have to post open meetings for them or anything like that? Do they in any way pull on town personnel?
No, but they are helpful to
They're helpful,
us
yes.
because
Yes, no,
we
no, no,
get
that's
things on the website, there are links. But other than whatever goes on the website,
Right.
and Tiffany does,
Okay, so that's all I'm suggesting is just a few days ago, we have been asked to stand up another committee, right? So we want to have some process for adjudicating when a committee should get stood up, when the life cycle, what it should be, some oversight as to what it's doing on an ongoing basis and align it with, you know, what the town is trying to do. And in some cases, we may need to retire committees that are at the end of their natural life. So that's all that to me, that's all that means. Not every single committee is going to get involved in every single goal, but we want to have some oversight, I think, that we might not have today. That's,
yeah.
I hope I answered your question, Ann, I'm not sure.
Yes. I agree that the town website is much better than it was years ago.
Okay, from my perspective, I agree with what Kathy said in terms of go-dos for 1 and 2, but I also think that it's a little bit broader than that. And part of what I think we need to do by getting, greater participation by department leaders, as well as number 4, the aligned goals of master plan and with departments, boards and committees, as well as to get a bead on where each department or committee is. And as you mentioned, if what they're doing still aligns with what their mission is. We do have some overlap in how some meetings occur, where if we could combine meetings, it could be more efficient sometimes. I don't know the best way to go about doing that, but I think in terms of the term we keep coming back to, which is align, that's critical. When volunteers have to go to multiple meetings for one thing, for example, and this is coming where, actually I'm not gonna example because I don't want any deliberating about it. But when, say, something comes before the planning board, but it's also involving Concom and possibly also involving, I don't know, trees, the tree warden, as opposed to first going to Concom, then going to the tree warden, and then going to planning board. Is there any way we can align those? And that is something under us.
So one, or you're suggesting, which I like what you're suggesting, if it's what you're suggesting, is when a particular issue has to be brought before multiple committees or boards, basically a combined meeting.
And what that does is it saves time and money for an applicant. It lets everybody, every committee or board be on the same page, know what's actually being said instead of it going circuitously around.
To that point, we see that a lot in zoning board.
Yeah.
Okay, whereas, have you gone to Concom yet? Okay, have you gone to the historic district commission? And will be approved pending approval, okay, there's gotta be maybe a written policy, you gotta do this before you do this.
Well, they're online.
Yeah,
the
but no one
those
follows
are.
them.
So, but to that point, what that does is the department or the board or committee assistant is typically the one who would make sure that applications have been completed, and notify who needs to be in attendance of any given meeting. So when we talk about pulling on town resources, that's something we would have to look at if we do want to try to make it more one-stop shopping or, yes.
Yeah, the big challenge with that is everybody's on different nights. Most boards,
Well, that's what I mean,
Tuesdays. And the other nights, you got something else going on.
and
And
that's,
then when you try to pull people together and it would be a challenge.
it
So what
would be
you could
because,
do is sort of a preliminary. And you have at least representatives. from-
Yeah, you can get maybe
From,
one or
each,
two.
and give some feedback to the applicant, it's sort of
Yeah.
a pre-hearing review. And you get the different review boards together,
Mhm,
so sometimes do that, they have.
right,
Because, the individual boards still need to hold their formal hearings.
with many agenda.
Yes, only one of which is in common with the others.
But I think that if we're talking about wanting to have a better relationship with townspeople, as well as different boards and committees who really know what's going on.
Can I ask
That's-
a question? So just newbie question here. So, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the boards and committees are free to pick whenever they want to meet, right? I mean, that's not something that's dictated. I
You know,
understand
it's not.
there's precedence,
That's it.
right? Okay.
However,
However, for a special meeting,
but when an application has been submitted, you've got timelines that have to be adhered to.
so
That was
yes.
for English.
Right, no, that's right. So let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Is it possible under the way things work to set aside what I'll call group meeting times? For example, we have set aside certain Thursdays, not knowing what we might put on the agenda,
Mhm.
but we know there may be something. And so we've just kind of said that's going to be our time to discuss special topics. Is it, and I used to do this where I work, we had a block meeting time, it was Wednesday afternoons,
Mhm.
when the executives would clear their calendar, if we needed to meet on a priority item. So this block scheduling, is it possible to have a 1 day a month, or I don't know what the right frequency would be, when
I think
a
that.
quorum would agree to get together?
In answer to that, we're not trying to find the solutions right now. And I think that if we can narrow down what is important to us, distill that today, and include that in part of how we make things easier for the townspeople to understand, but also make it easier for our boards and committees to know what's going on.
So in the past, we've talked about, I know we haven't fully executed,
Yeah.
is occasionally having an all boards meeting.
Yes.
So get together, at least get you and the land use boards together. Get you and miscellaneous boards together, some are more logically grouped together than others.
So going back to that, I just cut you off. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was the point.
Sorry. So when we talk about listening to the townspeople and trying to help with confidence, can we do that by combining some of the goals we have to make the processes over which we kind of see some of them, and Greg does. Is that something that interests the board, that do we take some of these items we're looking at and merge them?
I absolutely agree with that. I think we should. In fact, I would suggest, to your point, we shouldn't be solving it here. The goal could be to improve the efficiency and speed of decision-making, speed of decisions. Through process improvements or something, and get the department heads engaged in that as well. And, you know, the folks who are in this every single day, they probably have some really good ideas, which is another reason we don't want to solve it here.
Right, and there are,
So you're talking about, I'm sorry, you're talking about permitting in this case?
Well,
or-
What other types of decisions might need, I don't know that it's just permitting, but that's, so there are operational examples, which I think
Yeah.
permitting is a good example of an operational decision we want to have done faster for the residents.
that's not what I'm getting
No?
at.
Okay, I'm
No,
sorry.
because that's, we don't have oversight over that. There are timelines that different boards have to follow. And I don't think that we should be trying to tell the different boards and committees how to make their decisions, what timelines they have to follow to make their decisions. More what I'm getting at is cohesion and cooperation among boards and committees that help the townspeople and us, so that Concom isn't having a meeting that then they have to report to planning board that then ends up going to ZBA, and somebody's making notes on plans that get certified and filed, and nobody goes back to the plans because Concom didn't know about a notation.
So is it more for information sharing? Okay,
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's that, I think there's still an operational information
I agree.
sharing. And we need to implement a change, information sharing, and the two paths might be a little different.
And I also just want to reiterate what I've said a number of times, which is we don't want to step on Greg's toes. What's his oversight in terms of department heads and employees, but getting everybody to talk and info share. John, that's.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think the processes and how they work, and largely that's dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and most of it is permitting. And there's got to be a champion for any given project, and usually it's the architect or it's somebody who knows, yeah, I've got to sit in front of the planning board, I got to sit in front of Concom, I got all of these groups. And it's his or her kind of responsibility, I think, or at least for his client looks at it that way, to know who have I got to sit in front of. I've got a deadline that I'd like to start doing something, et cetera. Kind of coordinate that with all of the various committees that we've got to be in front of in town to get things done quickly. Now, I sit on the Historic District Commission. I can say that we have had some meetings where we've been unable, we haven't had a quorum or some sort of a problem with somebody that really wanted the deadline. And we've had an extra meeting like the following week.
Yeah.
And it's not too hard. Our meetings are Thursdays. And in fact, this Thursday is one. We haven't got enough people for a quorum. We're not going to wait until next month. We're going the following Thursday, because if somebody's got Thursday open because that's their meeting, they're on the board, and they have something personal that comes up, the following Thursdays, most Thursdays are probably okay.
Okay,
So-
and
So I
again,
think that's the person, excuse me, that,
yes and no. What I'm, and I apologize if I'm not really being clear with how I think we need to align and incorporate these different aspects. I think that we're finding more concern and involvement in a lot of aspects of how decisions are arrived at. And if you have the critical components, architect, Concom, builder, lawyer, whomever, homeowner, all meeting at one time, then there's less possibility for confusion and the process is made more openly. Does that make any sense at all?
I think it's all a great idea, whether or not it's.
It's,
gonna
yeah,
happen.
It's hard to get that many people
I
together.
sat through 2 hours last night and then they, all of a sudden we had to stop and continue because there
Right.
was a lack of information that the applicant got to the building department,
Right.
but didn't get to the ZBA. We didn't have that piece of information. So, all right, and then the applicants that, well, the respondents, it's not my responsibility to get to the ZBA because I was asked by the building inspector. So it got a little contentious, it's actually quite contentious, but, you know, we still now, we're gonna go over another month on this.
Yeah.
Okay, and nothing was resolved.
Well, and this is, again, not to try to solve how we do it now, but that is one of the situations where. Go ahead, Greg.
So I'm hearing two different aspects, so. What I'm hearing sort of focus on now is some permitting processes.
No, I'm not talking about permitting processes.
Well, we talk about architects and builders and.
It's the most common issue.
It's, and
Do you have a non-permitting example, Becky, that?
Well, I can think of something, for instance, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we're facing the MBTA zoning issue. That's across boards.
yes,
And
That's a good example.
that's a
That's-
great example.
that's something that we're on a short timeline for.
Yeah, I mean, what I said, after town meeting.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah,
Right, and
and-
this is where we can sit down with
Yes.
cross groups
A
and,
joint meeting with you and the planning board on 3A is definitely
So could
a
the
high need.
So without solving it, could the goal be to encourage more multi-board, however you want to call it,
Yes.
multi-board meetings to accelerate decision-making or improve information flow, something like that?
yes.
We can figure
It's
out how to solve it.
information flow. And this is again where it will sort of come back to whomever the assistant for a board or committee is, because that process is on them to make sure that when something comes for example, ZBA or planning board, all the documents have been properly filled and presented. I'm going down, we don't need to go down.
As long as we're going after that rat.
We cannot be deliberating anything.
The planning board doesn't have, or as of this afternoon, I guess, doesn't have such a person.
What?
We don't have a professional planner on staff. I'm hoping.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought.
So
I'm
if
hoping
you-
to leave out an interim, so I'm hoping to have an interim pretty soon.
It's still an administrative.
Well, that's,
Yeah, and
We have an
in the case that you were talking about with the ZBA, what person do you think should be responsible for making sure that the applicant knows exactly what has to be
I
presented?
think that every application is unique. All
Mhm.
right, and the information that was lacking yesterday just got to the building inspector yesterday. All right. Should the applicant, well, and this is a respondent,
I don't know, can we be,
no, but okay, I'm just saying is that, my point is that every application is gonna be unique, these things are gonna happen. We'd like to try to minimize it, okay, but a more simplistic view is, for instance, the Festival by the Sea. Okay,
Mhm.
you gotta get a permission from the Board of Health, you have to get, the fire department, out there, you know, police, fire, and that's something that, it could be a one-stop shop, this is what you need to do for this.
Can I make a
Yeah.
suggestion? I think Ann's example is an excellent example of where a multi-board meeting makes sense. The other examples that I'm hearing are operational issues, which quite frankly, if it's about check boxes not getting checked or information not being filled, that is, I believe, a town hall responsibility, and the boards shouldn't have to engage in that minutia. And if we are, I think us solving it as boards is not the right way to solve it. That's why I keep focusing on the more project or change related versus the operational aspect, so.
And if you have cross-board committee talk.
Yeah.
Not deliberate or deliberation, but talk, then you can get some of that make sure that some of that information is good to go, that you're.
True.
Some of it.
I would also suggest, though, that if there are a high number of incidents where basic information is missing before it's presented to a board.
Yep.
Greg, I would ask who the department head is responsible in that particular area, and
Mhm.
they need to improve their performance in that area. I think when boards try to
Yeah.
fill gaps, we add bureaucracy, and that's my fear.
Not valid, good point. So to bring
Anything
the
else we want to talk about on this?
right, to move along, so the question, so,
You answered the question.
well,
Also, an added goal is fostering cohesion and collaboration amongst various boards and committees.
What I heard
So-
so far are 3 goals. Number 1 was the aligning of the goal you worded here, the aligning goals of master plan with work plans for departments, boards, and committees. Number 2, revamp policy on communications/correspondence. And 3, encourage more multi-board meetings to improve information flow and alignment.
So that point, an example would be maybe a quarterly meeting between planning board, CBA, Concom, and maybe the building inspector.
Could be, yeah, we
Okay.
don't have to solve it now, but that's a great
Quarterly
idea.
meeting.
Yeah.
If we still need, bike and ped committee along with parks and recreation, I don't know why we wouldn't feel that those there, okay, a quarterly meeting where they all get together. And when their goals align.
Kathy, would you repeat your number 1 again, please?
It was just Greg, what Greg had written here, number 4, the aligned goals of master plan with work plans for the departments, boards, and committees.
And that was you, that's what you said as number 1, number 2, revamp policy on correspondence.
I think that's what his number 5 was. Yep, that's what I had number
And
2.
then what did you have as number 3?
What we just discussed, encourage more multi-board meetings to improve information flow and alignment.
Okay, and to that,
I think you want something with number 1. I mean, I understand it's partly go do it. And I think at least been hearing you say that more engagement with the
Yeah,
citizens.
So an engagement goal.
Yeah.
More, you can improve and
I mean,
increase
what I don't
engagement
hear
with the
more
community.
how to. I think the overall goal is
Engagement.
actions is more engagement.
Mhm.
and so we are solving that by we will be having office hours. We'll continue to do at certain, for example, at the fall festival, do we have a conversation?
We don't
corner?
have to figure out how we're doing it now. Yep,
Yeah.
but that's good examples of how
So,
it already
right,
works.
so that's, yes, engagement. Okay, so
I
that,
think engagement and immersion, wow,
say it again.
and immersion, getting involved, actually, like on Friday and Saturday, I know that I will be golfing with my golf,
Yes,
okay?
Yeah.
And,
being out there,
you know,
right? Okay.
Yeah,
if you need to golf,
I was speaking with Todd yesterday about his coffee with a cop deal.
Mhm.
Why don't we do the exact same thing? He's got like a corner he sets up with Laughing Gull, I don't know, Tuesday mornings, he said, pick another morning. And some Thursday or something, you've got, instead of that, you got Conversation Corner. I mean, people get to find that, mornings,
You're
somebody
approachable.
from,
when you're not in town hall, you're.
there's somebody from town, the government or organization that's there.
Both of those.
He's operating there at a couple of other places, right?
And
That's up.
what, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm terribly technical, but Fall Festival is this Saturday.
Mhm.
If we're going to do something there, we should decide what we're gonna do. Because we're not gonna see each other before Saturday.
It can be a simple email. Who wants to go sit? I mean, we don't have to have this very formal, but we know that we want.
Somebody should be in charge of it. And things that I,
And I like that thought in, and I have a suggestion for each one of these sub goals. Can we just appoint one of us to take the lead and flesh it out?
That's a great idea. Yes,
And that way
Okay.
we can gather input on the house.
excellent idea. So, okay.
I'd
Did,
like to volunteer for number one.
okay, so
Planning
that'll
goals,
be,
master
okay, Kathy D. Who would like? Well, Susan, the aligned goals of the master plan, that's Susan was
Yes.
working on that one.
plan.
So, and she was going to sort of spreadsheet get that to us, correct?
Do you want me to jump in? I'm listening. I'm not sure if you want me to jump in or not, but yeah, there's something, I think your direction in terms of putting your goals into these 4 buckets is great. Putting a select board member to connect with those. And then I can circle back because I'm working on a lot of tactical things right now, but they do support a lot of this. So we can combine efforts and really tighten it up.
So Susan, to paraphrase, you're gonna be involved in all of our governance actions, because that's what we're
Right. Well, that's,
asking you to do, and
yes.
we should have a board. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Susan.
I think John and I are going to revamp the policy.
Yeah.
Number,
it's like
yeah,
really
so
Yeah,
that is
right. Is that number?
two, our number 2. Kathy's on number 4, engagement. John Round and Harrison, number 2.
Line goals.
The aligned goals.
Oh,
Which one was it?
yay. We haven't gotten to you once. Okay, so Kathy Bellata, aligned goals. Correct?
Yes.
Number 2, John Round and Harrison, revamp policy on correspondence. So to include, for example, I had a 5 message back and forth email today
Somebody,
with some, yes,
okay.
and then some other emails. All of those are, is that what some just don't really mean anything. So when we're revamping the actually, we're not solving right now. Never mind, moving right along.
I
Okay,
think John and I would appreciate input
Yep.
in email. What people,
Examples of issues that are.
Yeah, that's fine.
so,
But we're just gonna put something on paper and then we'll push it around, but we'll get as close as we can.
yeah,
first input, then paper, then review.
There you go, love it.
okay, excellent. Number 3 is foster cohesion and cooperation of boards and committees. And I think that I could work with Greg on that. Does that make sense, Greg?
Fine, yes.
I mean, with your guide,
No, absolutely.
So Brian, this is your bailiwick. You love this engagement. Okay, so you're the point person for,
Here's this on the sheet.
My page roll and stuff.
that's not on there. We added that one.
Okay, that's why it's not.
That, actually, that's
That's
number, that's number, old number. That's old
Yes,
number
I'm
1.
looking at old.
Old number 1 is now new number 4.
Which threads through a couple of the other spots as
Yes,
well.
it does. Yes,
So, it does.
I know. I have that back.
Well, it happened when I didn't get to sit in my seat. What the hell, I was tired of it. So yeah, I'll do engagement. And so, and yes, we're not solving the issue now, obviously.
The fall festival is.
Right, so sort of,
So after this meeting, we can talk about the fall festival.
yes. So spreadsheet, kind of a who goes when and who's where, so that
Master plan.
Say it again.
A master
A
calendar.
master
There's
calendar.
not stuff going on in town all the time.
Yep, okay.
Someone shows up at the library, the drum guy, whatever it is.
Right.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be more than one
So
person.
now that we have our little, our, not really, but our goal. Do we want to come up with a time right now to come back to these? Like in,
I love the idea of follow-up. I'm afraid we're not gonna have time to get, it might make
I
sense to
agree.
go through all the goals and then figure out what the sequences of things.
okay. Perfect. All right, so now that brings us down to first of all, before we do that, Ann, did you want to talk about your suggestions and Kathy yours, or do you feel those are very covered?
I think my suggestions are more tactical. And I intended to train my puppy so we can meet people without feeding them.
I was wondering if that's gonna be.
I was trying to figure out what that was.
I thought yours made sense.
I know, that was good.
Yeah, I agree. I think mine are covered and there are tactical steps to the broader issues.
No. I just need a little more time. And not being at meetings and reviewing documents and.
I know that I see Kathy walking the dog all the time. It's a great way to meet people.
Oh my God. And if I could walk my dog without him turning into a helicopter, I would be.
One of the other really awesome places when you go to buy groceries.
Oh, I go to.
Never get out of there in under, half an hour.
Mm.
But that's okay.
So Greg, can I ask a question about this goal number 2 here? Preserving the small town character while addressing housing, economic and conservation needs. Originally, I thought this was the housing goal, and then it kind of spread. I'm a little unclear how we got from housing to some of the other things that were.
So it was more housing focused, and then
Okay.
at one of your meetings.
The only feedback I gave was on housing, because
Right.
that's what I thought we were trying to focus.
So at one point, we had decided to expand it to include economic development and conservation.
Okay,
Yeah.
so. So the big one here, I think, we're doing the same approach as we did on the other one. I looked for common elements, and it seems to me like the 40A and BTA zoning was a common element that we all felt we needed to be a top priority. So we need a decision, right? So there's a time frame here, so we need to develop an approach as to how we're going to address the MBTA 40A, whatever we want to call it. What do we want to label that? MBTA 48?
48.
Well, yeah.
48.
Get confused.
This is number
Already
3.
dropped it because people are still gonna find out.
Yes.
So it's section 3A of
Section 3A.
chapter 48.
Okay.
Just call it MBTA zoning.
I think that's the simplest.
Because that gives you a picture, where 3A,
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
48 people. that
48
40B,
Yeah.
40R. We can have discussion about 40R as well.
and one of the ways of dealing with 40A is A3, 3A is 40R.
Yes.
No, I like Ian's clear
Yes.
thing here. It's 48. We need a response. I don't think we have even discussed with anybody whether or not we want to achieve the 40, align with the 48 or not. And so that to me would be the first step, but I think we got a clear goal. We have to get a decision or a response, but is the right term, by December, right?
We
No,
have
well-
to have a plan
A plan by December,
by January 31st.
plan by January 31st. Okay.
And that's something that the planning board's gonna start looking at after,
Well,
we're in conjunction with the planning board.
so that was my question.
Before we do, Are we going around or are we just, now we're morphing and we're gonna do one thing? I'm happy with whatever.
I
I'm
know.
happy.
I
Okay,
just started again.
all right, good.
And moving totally off track real quickly though, and a couple of months ago, we discussed. With the MBTA liaison, rep, we just chosen about rep. The MBTA advisory board.
So,
Forgetting what we did with that.
well,
I know,
so,
you know,
yeah,
I'll be more than happy.
I volunteered for that, but I didn't, I said if you couldn't find somebody, I would,
And if.
Yeah.
I'll do it if Kathy is reluctant.
And
I'm
that,
not.
I think your time is better spent here.
Yeah.
In town.
well, and that's a logical tie-in with having the zoning background, I think.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I just think to answer your question, I was going around and I think this is one goal we should have no problem stating clearly because there are actual timelines that we have to meet, right? So, develop a response to the MBTA zoning law by what, January 31st?
Yes.
So we should have a rough track.
Ooh.
That's
Yeah.
pretty, we
Fast.
first need to have an idea of where we're going.
No, this is the end state that I was only referring
Bringing back.
to, what is our deliverable to the state? That was my.
That's a good question.
Oh,
Maybe we
I'm
just
sorry, I
say-
thought it was January 30th.
No, we just say
Oh,
no.
I'm sorry. So Greg, we actually have deliverable dates that we're due,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
The next deadline is to provide the state with a plan on how you will
Meet the requirements.
review and work towards meeting the requirements of the MBTA zone.
What is that deadline?
January 31.
The plan is
Oh.
due January 31.
Plan is due January 31. Okay.
Your approach,
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I'm
not,
trying to get crystal clear on what it is.
so.
Yes.
A completed plan that meets the compliance is then due December of 24.
Okay, so the approach, develop an approach for MBTA zoning law by January 31, 2023.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay, but the concern I have about that wording is that it lends one to assume we are going to align with that, and we may want to fight it like Rockport. We haven't had that discussion.
can I just jump in here a minute?
You don't
Yeah,
fight it, you either do it or you don't.
You should
No,
walk
we
away.
don't. We just walk
Right.
right.
Just walk away.
And Rockport's approach is they're suing for their funds.
Rockport did it. Their new zoning basically complies, and now they're being, which they approved. And now they have a handful of residents suing the town for approving that new zoning.
Oh, they don't like the zone, these people.
Okay,
Okay, all right.
so,
What I'm going to jump in here because we're solving right now. However, we do have to come up with a plan for this.
You need to come up with a response. Maybe that's the.
And
best way to do it.
response did not, but our response is not necessarily obligatory. We can put our response in, but it's not binding us.
No,
So that's where, and I say that,
I'm saying the response is easy, no.
well, the unfortunate thing is there are a lot of components. So right now we get huge amount of funding from the state that we could lose. And some of our zoning already complies with this. We already have that. And I don't,
again. I'm
Wanna be-
gonna Go down this rabbit hole.
right, and nor can we cannot be deliberating, it's not on the agenda. But so what I'm getting at is we need to have a meeting about this. And we know
It
that,
probably warrants a special meeting.
exactly. Not this moment,
We pull together quite a bit of background information.
yeah.
And
This week.
Right.
invite numerous boards.
So
this is the first.
starting to solve, and all I'm trying to do just make sure I'm clear on deadlines and timelines.
Yes.
And who is taking the lead? It's my understanding that planning board takes the lead on, so who takes the lead on the response? Because does it have to come from the select board because it's response to a law, or is it planning board?
Good question.
So, yeah, so the official response should come from the select board,
Okay,
but obviously it is a project that heavily involves the planning.
I understand, but I'm just trying to get on roles, responsibilities and deadlines, and we'll figure out how we're gonna do it.
And I agree. Is this something that then goes to town vote? The 40A ultimately,
Because
okay,
it involves zoning, yes.
right, well, that's, I just wanted, and that would be the December response
By December
by
20th.
December 24th.
So this
Okay.
includes it, so the December 24 deadline includes a town meeting vote.
Sure.
But the response by January 31 does not include.
No, because the 24 is your plan of implementation.
Okay.
So,
So
Okay.
then I would suggest
Is it the plan of implementation or the implementation?
implementation plan.
implementation.
By the end of 24, I think we're supposed to have done it.
So what you're supposed to show, what you're supposed to show by
Yes.
the,
Mhm.
what you're
Wow.
supposed to show
Thank
by
you.
January 31 of 23 is how you get to a conclusion of what you're going to do by December of 24. You just have like 2 years to put together your final.
But we don't have to meet the goals. We have to increase housing.
We have to permit increased housing.
Yeah,
We don't have to build anything.
Right.
Okay,
But we don't have to meet.
All right. we're gonna,
So this is a good one. I would suggest to assign a board member to flesh out in detail. And
I've been looking at this recently and I have seen the application for that we're supposed to fill out by January, and I'd be happy to work with Greg on putting together a timeline and making sure that everyone is agrees on what the deliverables are at what stage.
and continue to drive it with the planning board throughout this.
Man, I'm not driving that planning board.
no.
Well, so here's my reason for asking that question.
I'm more of a liaison for the planning.
Right, I don't think there should be two different board members.
If you want to take.
No, I'm happy to have you do it as long as I think the liaison assignment should change. I'm not as up to speed as you are on it, so doesn't matter to me one way or another. I just think there should be alignment between whoever takes this goal and who is the liaison for the planning board, that's all.
Should it just be one project specific?
Say that one more time.
No, I'm just asking if it was just
Yeah,
project
project
specific, if it was just this particular
Yes.
project that would preclude 2 members of the select.
That's interesting. That's a good point, because I think if it's, as Brian said, project specific, then it's really kind of separate from sitting in on their meetings.
If the liaison is just sitting in on the meetings, because I've been doing a little bit more than that, given the zoning, stuff. So that was the
Yeah.
world from which I looked at this goal. So if the liaison thing is just sitting in on the meetings or reporting, I'm totally fine with that.
That's on those meetings. This is probably gonna be a little different.
That's
This
what
will
I'm
be
saying.
interactive.
It is, and whoever is gonna do it should do the whole thing. That's kind of say
Can
that.
I suggest that I put together a document that I share with all of us? If we agree on it, then you get to drive it from there.
That sounds good.
Like I said, either way, as long as there's clear roles and responsibilities, I'm
Yeah.
totally fine.
So Brian had put his hand up to be the MBTA zoning liaison.
No,
Well, it's not, no, it's advisory board. It's not, this
that
is
has
not,
nothing to do with zoning.
it's got nothing to do with zoning.
Okay.
This is-
Oh, yes. All right,
MBTA
thank you.
operations.
Yep,
This is
yep.
Working with Chuck, Chuck was looking for someone who's as far as some of the things that are going on here.
Okay, so
It might be the
MBTA,
core
all
values.
right,
That's a vacant slot right now.
Right, I
I'm
mean, anyone's
just
looking at.
all right, thank you for the clarification. Brian, you looked a little panicked there for a moment.
Well, no, I mean, it's just.
I'm just kidding, you did not at all, I just had you confused. Okay,
That's easily done. Obviously.
all right, so now let's get back onto the preserving. This is, and coming up, I remember when we first started the master plan and talked about trying to define character. And, you know, it's just so nebulous, and every single person has a different interpretation of that. So when we talk about this, I don't really like that term. And which iteration of small town character are we preserving? You know, do we want to go back to having the fish flakes out on Tux Point? We could do that. They might not like it.
It's very subjective.
It is that there are lots of commonalities.
No, I don't.
I mean, no one's going to disagree that Manchester is and should remain a close-knit, small, classic New England seaside village.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that statement.
No, and I think that's very well put.
That's a broad brush, and what it'll mean slightly different things to different people, but we will never be an industrial complex. We will never be a place of,
Not good.
we will never have
It was at the infrastructure.
many high rises in town.
It's the bedroom communities, but.
It's essentially a bedroom community, and it will remain that way. Yeah, there's differences about what sort of bedrooms it should have.
Right.
And how, you know, what the village, how do we maintain a vibrant village?
Yeah.
But I do think there's a general.
No, I think that's very well said. Exactly what you said, Greg, is I think where we go forward with this part. Okay, so with that in mind, Kathy, did you want to?
So I think when I looked at all of the input on goal number 2 here, I saw 3 main themes. One was the MBTA zoning, which we just discussed. The second was the harbor master plan, which we already said we want to do. And the third, I had just put in here about, and once again, I'm not sure quite how to phrase it, but I just put remove barriers to achieving affordable housing in safe harbor. So that came out of the master plan. The select board has a role to play in helping the housing authority advance their plans. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I think we play a supporting role by removing barriers. So that's kind of how I tried to phrase it. So those are the key 3 themes that I saw. And the rest of it was just wordsmith.
John?
Yeah, no, I agree with Kathy in looking at all of this. I look at the cell signaling thing. That's not so much, I don't think, in our bailiwick. That has a life of its own. Cell signaling has to decide what it wants to do when, and we can respond. We don't have to be proactive with this tax increment thing until they decide what they want to do. And we can put that, we can feed that in. But the forums on the housing, I think we've done that a lot. And I don't see any independent, any need for independent.
Another part of the MBTA zone.
Yeah. That's correct. In other words, that's done on an as-needed basis, that's project driven. It's not, you want to talk about housing, I think everybody is in agreement. I won't say everybody in
I was
town,
gonna
because I read
say.
some of these articles occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I mean, to get back to the character and culture and say, I don't want it to change, frankly, it's changing. And if you don't do something about housing, it's gonna change whether you like it or not, because all of us in 20 years are gonna be 20 years old, and nothing's changing except age. And when you're 20 years older than you are now,
You're old.
that changes your culture. So, and I know right now, I don't know, 30% of the people are over 60, and in 10 years, it's gonna be 40%. And that's change,
What's what attrition?
and at the expense of the other, all the people that are under 60. There will be, those groups will all be smaller, and that by definition will change the culture.
I
And
think the demographic is going to continue to move north of that.
well, then that means the character of the town changes, whether you know it or not.
Class to get into the town.
Yes. So that's a problem, and that's why this housing thing is such an important factor to try and keep the demographic where it is, because that's what makes the town what it is today, over the past 20 years. So all of this is kind of circulating in all of these things that, as I say, the forums, there'll be enough of those with regard to what's coming up. I see the suggestions on the warrant. That's fine, not a problem with that. So one question I had is, how are we going to deal with all of these issues without a town planner? Or are we going to get one right away?
So I think we'll get at least an interim part-time contract to keep the ball moving on this crucial project. We got awarded a couple of grants.
Yeah.
We have tried multiple times and third try they came through. Just this week.
But I mean, that person does a lot of stuff in supporting various things.
Right.
Absolutely. I saw what Sue is involved in.
But that'll be, the role will be reevaluated with input from the planning board.
Yeah. Yes.
This is the other one useful.
Yeah, but I don't want to.
But I mean, that person is going to support, provide a lot of the support with the 40A discussion.
You mean the MBTA zoning?
Excuse me, we've got new terminology, yes.
Yes.
The train house.
So I think that is pretty critical for a lot of the things that are
Mhm.
kind of under the listing here, that person. However, whatever form he or she takes, full-time, part-time, temporary, contractor. It's gotta happen soon. And the only other thing, the placemaking, that has been a topic we have discussed off and on. Where does that go with the grant that we have?
Can someone tell me what that means?
Thank you for asking.
What- I forgot.
And this is, there were some webinars that we, and grant that we got, trying to help figure out how Manchester and Essex communities can continue to assist and keep vibrant our downtown. Part of the problem is, figuring out where to park, what we have to offer. And so that talks about placemaking is addressing signage.
Isn't that wayfinding? Are we making?
That's part of it.
It's all part of it.
Okay.
It's,
I thought there were two separate categories, one of placemaking and one of wayfinding. One of them was mostly signs and one of them was something else, and it's something else I don't know.
So placemaking, what is unique and special about your business district or your core center of the village? So is there a special park? Is there artwork? Are there?
So this is more of a brochure and less of a sign.
It could
No,
be,
it's actual physical features on the ground. Little, benches along the way.
Right.
that people can enjoy themselves.
and how does
The
the
renovated
downtown look?
Masco Park.
Yeah.
the Reed
And
Park.
that's working also in conjunction with the downtown improvement.
It does,
It is.
absolutely.
very, very close.
Absolutely.
But there are, there are,
But typically they include wayfinding in placemaking.
Yes.
I don't know why they just can't say it.
Well, I don't know where that stands. That was something that was initiated, I think.
So we just got word this week that we were
Oh.
awarded a technical assistance
Okay, all right, so I
We're
know,
given-
Great, that'd be so good.
So we're given a consultant basically to work with the DIP and the planning board and whoever else. The chamber.
DPW,
To that point, is that really a select board goal? Or are we gonna have to make decisions about anything, or is that an operational thing, or is it a
There'll be
planning board?
some decisions for you, like. If it involves some improvements to town. limits.
and would this be driven by the dip? Dip driven?
Just the planning board,
So that's right. And DPW, if there are,
implementation.
So would it be a
The grant we have is for planning placemaking,
yes,
and if we implement placemaking, then we're going to be spending town funds to do so.
or and that's where grants.
That's
So
where we
Would the
can,
goal be implement placemaking improvements, or just implement placemaking? What is our goal?
I don't think this goal stays with us,
Okay,
right?
that's what I'm.
I think I think that, and anyway, I think it's very important, but I don't think
I
that.
think you're away from this being a goal. that you need to
Okay,
worry about.
so, and how
If at
about
all,
off-season events? Is that really in our,
that's also part of
yeah,
what came out of placemaking, but also trying to help assist the downtown. and
Again,
keep
it's not
things-
something that will involve you.
Okay, so it's
You
not
should be
goal, but-
aware that. We just got word of the grant this week that we will fund an effort to help the business community develop and execute a new off-season. event.
the Chamber of Commerce might drive some of
Yes,
this.
Chamber County.
No, I know, I mean, there was talk about some sort of, like, we had a festival in August, maybe doing something on a smaller scale in the winter.
And what about, for example,
Business by the sea.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
December,
But
but
that-
I
that's turned into a whole weekend, which is.
yeah, or actually,
Something late winter, early.
this is February.
what is it, March? Debbie can't take minutes when we're all talking. So, John,
Yeah, so let's just say that that's something that's on the list here, but I think we all agree, we don't have to worry about it, the downtown improvement group is on top of that. Chamber of Commerce is on top of that, DPW is dealing with some of that. That will come back to us at the appropriate time.
correct. Okay, anything else, John?
No?
All right, Brian?
No, I'm very concerned about Ian's puppy.
You mean the earring puppy?
Did your puppy leave the hearing?
that means I can't.
Okay,
No, I think.
so just a little reference here, it's 5:15. And
We've got.
we're on
full
page
pages.
1. So. But I'm not trying to rush you, Brian. I'm just,
I'm good.
okay, you're good. And
I think this one comes down to, the MBTA zoning, which will include holding forums on housing needs. In the very short term, we can address housing by, supporting the planning board, articles that are coming up at the meeting, in November. So they have 3 things that will significantly increase the amount of housing useful for seniors. Good use of land, and smaller, housing, units. And I think getting behind that effort, would be in the strong interest of the town in this call.
Just to.
no. Are you all set?
I'm done.
Okay. I'll come back to you. So, and I agree with what we've all been saying at this point for the goals, which come down to the MBTA zoning. And we'll do the document on that. And Kathy Bellata will then go forward with that to planning board. The other is advancement of a harbor master plan. I think that's something that we do have to continue on being on top of. And then respond, however we can figure out removing barriers to affordable housing, et cetera. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the wording, removing barriers. That kind of is a little aggressive for my, and I also think that it potentially steps on toes. So, but I do think that figuring out how best to, as Ann said, support the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Authority, and the planning board for those things. Now, and part of it is we will talk about the warrant later. And can come back to any comments about that because that is not on our agenda right now. There we go. Thanks, Lord. I'm very confused. All right.
So if I could summarize.
Before we do that, Brian, if you want to say anything, okay.
You know, the only thing that I think I'd like to circle back is I think that we should be a little more proactive with cell signal. Just engage sooner rather than later. There could be some mitigation that would then play into the housing aspects of these things. And I think that even in informal discussions.
That's a
upfront,
good point.
okay.
Yeah.
And then see
Yeah.
where it goes from there, as opposed to having something dropped in our lap. We can be
Yeah.
in front of it. That's just my feelings.
So the only, yes, and I think that's a really good idea. How does everybody else?
So what's the
make that?
outcome you were looking to achieve?
Well, the outcome would be to continue the maintain the characteristics of the small town. Okay, which obviously a big campus might be construed as something beyond this.
So proactively engage with cell signaling to
To help to
to
design and
reduce the risk to the town or to?
no, actually to actually try to find ways to mitigation that can enhance the town outside of the actual construction of their campus.
So are you talking about, for example, the use of the tax increment financing? Are you talking about just, and what I thought you meant by that, by the engaging is having, and I go back to the word cooperative and alignment, of what they're envisioning and what is most
Exactly.
beneficial to town. Is that?
So if I can suggest some wording there, so we don't have to solve it here.
Yeah.
Proactively engage with cell signaling to benefit the town.
Yes.
And then, Brian may want to take the lead on
More than happy
that.
to.
But
Okay.
many different ways to benefit.
Yep, excellent, all right. Will they be going before the ZBA? Are you coming off the ZBA now?
Within the next couple of months, I'll be coming up before this ever is. Before
Okay,
this ever comes
that
up,
would be my only concern.
I'll be off before that.
Look at this, Brian, you picked up two things now. You
I'm
did
exhausted just thinking about it.
And now this.
Exhausted.
Woo woo, okay. And. Oh, we already did go around, sorry. Moving right along. Page 2.
So I'm just trying to summarize what we discussed before we went on to another.
Yeah. Yes,
So Greg, I'm not sure if you have this. So the first one was develop a response for the MBTA zoning law.
Yeah.
Second was create a harbor master plan. Second, support planning board. So I'm trying to summarize here. Support planning board efforts to diversify housing inventory. Do we have to get specific about, I'm uncomfortable with getting specific about which articles we're going to support before we've had that deliberation. So that's why I was suggesting we just say support the planning board efforts to diversify housing.
Would you just support efforts to?
Efforts, right, not just planning
It's
boards.
not just the county, maybe others.
Oh, support efforts to diversify housing.
Okay, so that's another goal. So now, we have,
And then we had another discussion on the affordable housing.
yeah,
Support the Manchester Housing Authority, and Manchester Affordable Housing Trust to
Right, let's do that as part of what we just said.
yeah,
diversify. Well, there is a difference between, I guess the only reason I have them separate, we could certainly combine them. When we get to the next level of detail, the actions we would take might be very different, but fine with combining.
I think
So
that's
support
something-
efforts to diversify housing.
Yeah.
And then proactively engage with cell signaling to benefit the town.
Okay, so I missed one somewhere. I've got the response to MBTA zoning, support efforts to diversify housing, and then proactively engage cell signaling. What was the one I missed?
Our master plan.
Thank you. Yes, I had that circled. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much.
And as far as leads on these, see, Brian is the liaison to the Harbor Advisory Committee.
Yes.
You know what? That's a lot then, because if you're going to be with cell signaling,
You can have the MBTA then.
I'm happy to do Harbor. I'm happy to take on the Harbor Advisory. I don't have a vote right now. So okay, I will take on that. All right, Brian,
Okay.
got it, Debbie? Nothing. Oh, no, Brian isn't now. Okay. So we have,
Diversify housing.
yeah, the support efforts to diversify housing. Right now, we have Anne, who's gonna work on the 40B document. John?
Yeah, I'm looking at one other thing that has not been spoken about here under this list. I guess this is Kathy, yours, identify, communicate infrastructure capacity for water and sewer.
So the number 2 I had pulled out from the master plan there, remove barriers, et cetera. The A and the B underneath were suggestions on how the select board could take actions to remove barriers. So when you talk about adding any type of housing in town, the very first question I hear is, well, the sewer
Yeah.
can't take it,
Yeah.
the what can't. If we proactively identify what the town can take, so we heard the water treatment plant is perfectly fine, and they, if we can proactively, address those concerns right up front, you may not get fewer questions, but you'll answer them a lot faster. So I don't know what the capacity is for growth in the town, whether it be infrastructure, whatever, and it's the very first question that always gets asked, so I don't know. if we can-
For these, there's no issue with any of this stuff for growth for this town.
But what we haven't clarified, I think, for the residents is how much growth can the current infrastructure
A lot.
accommodate.
A lot.
So that was the suggestion.
You know, I mean, we've got so much ledge, we can never get beyond.
Understand,
beyond
I'm
it.
just-
So, but I think communicating what's been done
Yeah.
and addressing that's been part of what has been discussed in the water task force group a little bit. And I think that we will be putting flyers into the bills on a quarterly basis that will be dealing with that, just one aspect. There are some other things that we'll be doing as well, but that's an easy place to do that.
Yeah, I think that these 2 sub things are sub goal, actions that can support the third goal of supporting efforts to diversify housing. Oh, do a little more communication on, like you said, what's already been.
That will come through in the report that the select board will get from the water task force, so that's kind of consolidated.
Yes, and certainly Chuck can put together the water treatment side of it.
Yes, he would.
Yeah, the wastewater treatment side of it.
He can deal with, even though that's, yes, although the water task force
He's
is,
got a 300-page document.
this
that
is the
explains
clean
this.
water, we're not talking the dirty water, but this is
Yeah.
everything.
Leave the dirty water to Chuck.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
So,
But did that detour things a little bit, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure, will you be, doing the support efforts to the diversify housing?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. All right, there we go. Sorry, I have to put that one back. Okay. Number 3, implementing climate resiliency measures. This is massive. Again,
Are we going around again?
actually, I think what I'd like, if it's all right, is to get Greg to kind of, because this, a lot of these are part of, you're involved with that, the organization, right? The Cape Ann. And I think a lot of this comes from that.
Yeah, I mean, the most tangible thing that we have coming is the new CDM grant. To look at the village core and what are options for protecting it. And so that's just getting underway. So you can form a steering committee for it.
Right.
It's,
So
um,
that's where I was, I don't know if we're to this, I don't want to put this off, but I think that how do we best,
So I think, we need to focus a lot on the CGN grant in that process.
Mhm.
That's immediate. The work that the Cape Ann Coalition is doing will be very helpful long term. It's a lot of good sort of best practices being collected, a lot of good data in terms of ecosystem health and how you can use our forest lands and our market to be our partner in protection. There'll be a lot of suggestions on new building codes to enact responsible state allows us to, if they aren't used to that along those lines. I think it makes a lot of sense to get ready to prepare a more detailed climate action plan that you implemented, Kathy. That spell out some specific steps for us to take.
So if I can articulate what my first suggestion was, and I didn't really do a good job of articulating it. For me, the first step for the board is to make sure we're all on the same page and get educated. So you have talked about a lot of things that personally I am not familiar with. I'm not familiar with our emergency preparedness plans. The climate resiliency isn't just about the buildings and the assets, it's about the people, right? And typically a board would periodically get a presentation on, okay, what's the latest, as far as emergency preparedness, or, and even if it's not a presentation, it's just a document that you send. I just feel a little uninformed. So it sounds like there's a lot of great work already being done, and honestly, I just think the next step for me personally is just, I need to get up to speed.
I think a lot of people benefit from that. I'm thinking about.
Well, I don't want to assume that I'm, you guys.
You're not alone. So yes, it would be helpful if we pull together again, especially to focus on what has been happening.
I'd even just love some of the material to be sent for a reason
Sure.
and then we can decide what kind of a meeting we need. Because like I said, I don't want my lack of experience here to drag us into a 3-hour meeting if it can be a 1 hour, you know, a half hour
You're not
discussion.
alone at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't, this is where I think there's input we would get from Chuck, for example, a lot of, and these are. But that was my point. Where do we go down this list right now? Or do we take this to a meeting, not to table it, but just to give it its own time?
I don't even know who you start with in our.
Yeah.
In our town hall here. But who wrote the CCM grant? This is the first time I see this acronym.
The coastal zone management or something.
Biona was there, so
It wasn't either one. It was a consulting group.
So we teamed up with the engineering firm and they gave us a lot of support for that. So me, Sue,
Okay,
Chuck and they and the consultants.
so it's the usual list of suspects, you know, something like this. Okay,
So Becky, could a goal just be to review the current plans and in-process projects and then determine after that point in time how we, you know, what we need to do and take this forward?
So. I'm totally at a loss. So with what you're saying on that, I think that's a good idea, but how do we review the current plans? Do we review those? Do we go as a group, sit down with Chuck and Nate, or what?
So let me start by pulling together sort of the more critical ones, a bit of a library for you to start reading on your own.
Mhm.
And then we'll schedule a future meeting and to discuss those until the key points. And then pull in those CDM grant and those goals.
Do we want to set that goal for, well, we want it after town meeting, this, we can't do that, and then we're into Thanksgiving.
January.
So my hope would be that you would have read materials and be ready for discussion by early in the new year.
Okay, perfect,
I agree.
yep, all right. Okay. Okay, that's excellent, all right, thank you on there. Number 4. You all are gonna get to do your first budgets. Happening, Ryan. So maintain fiscal discipline, develop operational strategies to drive cost savings and maximize efficiencies and resiliencies. You want to start this one off, Ann? We'll go the opposite way. You don't have to.
Oh.
But you were on FinCom, so.
No, sorry, I'm a little behind, but scrutinizing budgets, I think we do that every year.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
This year's gonna be hard.
Well,
It's definitely gonna be a hard year.
I was in
Yeah, no question.
FinCom when we had 5% and 6% inflation. Yeah, it's hard. But
It's been relatively easy because of the.
because of the low inflation, as long as inflation is below 2.5, the world is a nice place.
Yeah.
Just as a note, the mooring fees are currently, I think, it's the highest in the state, and they are way beyond what the chapter 91 says mooring fees should be. So sooner or later, somebody else in town is going to realize that.
I think I've heard it.
Um,
I realize that.
We're,
And
okay,
that, okay, so I'm
we're not
going-
deliberating.
we're
that
not
right now.
deliberating, but I'm giving you some information. I'm attempting to give you some information. Yeah, as everybody else is being squeezed at the same time. What I had suggested was working toward a 1-year extension of union contracts with a potentially bonus to avoid having to do negotiation when Social Security has just gone up by 8%. Just hope that inflation is gonna come down.
I'm hoping we know that early next year. That'll help. That's the case.
Yeah, school override or school correction. That's.
That they're going to ask for.
One clarifying question.
Yeah,
I have heard the term, school override, I'll just say that frequently. But, so what and I really like the way Ann phrased this goal here, determine the best way to correct the
Mhm.
regional schools' chronic operational deficit. So that is the crux of the issue. That, and I think the language, I love the language that Ann has here, because when we use the term school override, it implies that it's a given and that everybody's gonna say yes. And so I think the way Ann had it worded here is, there are some underlying issues, and that may not be us to take the lead on it, but we need to find ways to support the correction of the chronic deficit.
That's
Okay.
going to be a very interesting process.
Yeah. I
To
mean,
say the
We're
least.
still gonna get that.
Because there.
we're not trying to solve this right now.
No,
And to keep going, we have 20 minutes. Before 6 o'clock, and we are meeting at 6:30, is that right?
So we could possibly, with a bio break.
Yes, I'm just trying to be
Right.
cognizant. Right, go ahead, Ann.
Going for a CPA surcharge, yeah, that would be absolutely wonderful thing to do. But the CPA, increasing the CPA surcharge, particularly since the state has just started, has increased their match. Makes all the sense in the world. We once succeeded in moving it from 1% to 1.5%.
we were at 3 at one point.
You were three very
Yeah.
short.
You know, maybe 10 years or so ago.
Yeah,
I mean, I interject. I agree we should do that, but I don't think you can do that. I don't think enough people will buy in unless you say, because this is where we intend
That's
the
why
bulk
it's
of
a
this
project, right?
money is going to, has been stated right here. Just say, we're gonna do this because we're gonna have projects, we don't know what they are. I don't think that's not gonna fly. The rotunda, everybody understands that. It's not a problem.
and
But maybe it
when we
should.
have the engineering for Sweeney and know what it's actually going to cost. That would
Which
be,
funds?
it's a swamp,
I know,
it's,
it is a small.
Convert it to a nice skating.
Pickleball.
There you go, skating rink for the winter.
yeah, climate change, climate warming. So these are all things that we've looked at year in and year out. I agree with all of them.
So would you prioritize any of those, Ann?
The most important one,
Sarah, we're 6:30 actually.
I know, can I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
the most important is getting a school budget. The correction
Mhm.
for the schools resolved, that's. The others are all mostly stuff that happens year in and year out. This one is a special year for that.
Brian?
I'm gonna, and as much as this is my first budget season, I'm gonna sit down.
Ron?
not on the list here, but fiscal discipline, I'm all for exploring more regionalization initiative.
Shared services.
Yes,
It isn't.
That's,
is it in there?
Briefly.
well, that was, yeah,
All right, okay.
yeah.
So, I think we're gonna have to go that route a little bit with regard to the fire department in terms of, assistance there with regard to EMS sort of things, because can't believe an ambulance costs $450,000. So I'm in favor of that. The school thing, I think that's really hard. And I've sat through a couple of budget discussions, and they just go through cycles. They got a bunch of money and they just kind of burn through it. At some point, they're out of money and you gotta go to an override. And then it just keeps on going. And I know that much of the cost that they've got is not in our control. It's just, this is what, it's all personnel and there are contracts and there are costs. So it's very, very hard to try and manage that. And it is the elephant in the room in our overall budget because it's half of it. So we would need somebody to chat with in the school group to maybe better understand that. That's my understanding so far. But my prioritizations when I do here would be, yes, let's look for regionalization where we can save a little bit more money. The rest of this is, I think, fees for service with trash and higher fees across the board. The townspeople kind of like the services they've got.
Did you?
And I mean, I know lots of people that go to the dump on Saturdays, not here, but they don't have trash pickup. That's not gonna work. And so it's
Yeah.
pay to play.
So, oh wait,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, please finish, John.
I think I'm done.
What I'm hearing, the conversation that, well, first of all, I agree, again, I'll just state, I think Ann's phrasing of the way to handle the school district role is important. I might suggest a tweak to have it say, identify options to correct the regional school district's chronic operational deficits. I don't know that there's one best way, but maybe we can identify options. Understand, but usually when there is a chronic operational deficit, there is a structural issue that I'm sure the school committee will be looking at to resolve it. The
I
way
think the school committee may be looking at something else.
Okay, well, we're not,
but I guess what I'm saying I'm not sure I agree with John's point that we don't, I know there are portions of what is in the school's budget right now that are opportunities for shared services between that town and the school district. They have a lot of facilities they operate, okay? So a lot of the money that is spent is not just educational and probably this has already been looked at, but I'm just saying, I think that things that may have been looked at in the past, perhaps, can be looked at again. So I just think there's options. And, that would be my only suggested rephrasing, but I'm fine with the way Ann had it. All of the other stuff that's listed is really, we need a strategy for driving operational efficiency and cost improvements, which may include shared services, automation, all those things. So I think that all boils down to an operation strategy. I honestly think that is something that, Greg, the town department heads should do together. Happy to support that. But I think they are the ones in the trenches and they probably have some good ideas, but I think the more they work together and the more we help them with that, I think that can help move things forward. The only other thing we didn't really talk about here that I listed is I think there's a lot of good work and savings that are being achieved. I know when I sat with, in the town accountant, just a lot of good things she's doing and nobody knows about them. So that's why I use the term widely communicate, the good things that are happening, because that can go a long way to building that transparency. But once again, I'm not sure that's our role to do as a board. That may be a goal, Greg, for the
Tiffany.
Tiffany or whoever. But there's a lot of good things being done there.
Are you all set?
One other thing that I think might go back here that I saw on the list, and I had asked Greg about this aggregation program.
That's Kathy did that.
That, well, I asked Greg about that, I think in July
Mhm.
or August.
I had a good update on it today.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so,
too.
because, and there happened to be very coincidentally an article in, I don't know, some newspaper,
The
Yeah.
Globe had an article.
That's
maybe
right.
it was a couple of days ago,
Yeah, a
very
couple of days ago.
coincidentally.
I'm giving a copy.
And it was kind of a story that we were familiar that you had mentioned.
Yeah.
It's hurry up and
So
wait,
this-
and wait 2 years.
Right, so this is for residents. So,
It includes residents.
Well, this is the town, at the town level.
Yes, but some of these aggregation programs, the residents of the town also benefit by getting the same lower rate. And some towns and cities are automatically enrolling them, so people don't even have to do anything.
That's the angle that we're pursuing.
Right.
Everyone in town will be on this unless you opt out.
Unless you opt out, right? Right. And that's what Gloucester does, 1623 had something on that recently.
So, I can give more.
All right, well, that's details for another.
But once again, that's an example of good work that's already being done, that's done in silence.
And I think that, from my perspective on these, even though, I think the explore more fees for services, that I think falls under what Kathy was saying in terms of, the operational strategies, department heads, and that's really under Greg, that's not really under us. But
The overlap is,
which what?
where it overlaps with you as a board, is what service levels you want.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
So
agree with that.
that's where I and the other department heads need some direction.
So,
Are you willing to lower service levels or not?
It's
No,
not
and
low.
that's where we've heard from the townspeople. And they don't want lowered services, and that's, I think with that in mind, no, let's not lower services, but to your point. Do we open the dump and have a pickup as well?
That's a lower service level.
no, so here, may I
For some people, not necessarily,
Some people
So-
love going to dump.
yeah.
It's a Saturday morning.
Well, that's what I mean. If we take away the down.
Just to clarify what this is, because this was my day job, so I have to type it. So I did my day job. You're talking about, as Greg said, service level.
Right.
That
And then
means
different ways to provide that.
there are
Yes.
different ways. It's not always a takeaway. So how we talk about it is really important
Yep.
because it gives
Good point.
people the wrong impression and then the conversation stops. And this is why I think your department leads probably already know which services, because I asked some questions and I already got a list. Which services are underutilized,
Mhm.
which, and therefore, if we put some attention on them, could drive revenue. Or, you know what, maybe only 5 people in town use that service, and maybe we want to have a side conversation, and would you be willing to save X number of dollars? And get rid of that service? If you actually put the dollars in there, sometimes they change their mind, sometimes they don't. So it really, how we talk about it is just so important. It's not about cutting, it's about right sizing.
And there are a lot of moving parts right now. For example, starting November 1st, the state is changing what they're allowing to either go into a landfill or to be incinerated. So that's where costs will go up and ways to mitigate that. Do the people say, all right, I don't care, I'm not gonna compost, I want to pay more for that? And technically, legally, the state does not allow recyclable items in the trash. So some people still throw away recyclables or they don't compost. We have to pay for that. So that's part of service levels. So what I'm getting at is what I think are very critical items. I love the positive aspect, the why we communicate the achievements. Maybe we could have another little bullet point on the town website. Sort of how the project board is. You could put recognition board, achievements board, and that way it can have tabs as well, not tabs, but bullets, and people can go to that. But I just think that that needs to be put out there, as Kathy said, and that's that Tiffany can do that. So that's not us. But as far as looking at the shared services, automation, the electricity aggregation, those kinds of items, I think we do need to be involved with. And that also pairs with service levels. So that, as far as I'm concerned, the shared services falls under service levels, and that's what I would go with for priority, is that service levels. And then number two is how can we drive cost savings? That's again under service levels without undermining schools and services provided. I just keep bringing it all back to service levels. So
to clarification, you currently have two goals on the list, one related to schools and one related to town, or
I have
Just
one
one.
service levels.
one
because-
related to service levels?
Yeah,
So,
under which it's schools,
got it, okay, yep.
shared services, all of those. And with that, because some of what you were saying, the operational strategies and the cooperation between the department heads, that also goes back to one, advancing confidence and credibility of town governance, and that fostering of cooperation and cohesion.
So what do you think is the board's responsibility there? Review and, are you talking about identifying opportunities to adjust service levels or provide, I don't know, what comes in your mind?
I honestly don't have anything specific about this right now. I think this is, we're going to be addressing this with the upcoming budget. There are a lot of items that will come before us and will foster the discussions of shared services. The ways, the best options to correct chronic operational deficits, a lot of this will be looked at.
It will be tactically discussed, it's not a strategy. However, that process, I agree, will identify opportunities for that can be used to develop an operational strategy leveraging various service levels, something like that.
And I think we can, after we've done the budget,
Yeah.
we'll get a good sense at the
Yeah.
annual town meeting, what comfort levels are with the current state of the economy.
And use our new goal number one, increasing engagement with the community to flesh out.
Yes.
So one goal
So
under
revisit.
this one.
And we can revisit this after the annual town meeting. Is that correct?
Well,
Too far out?
it's too far out.
Can we do it concurrently with, while we're looking at the budget?
Yeah, that was actually what I put here, is as we're looking at the budget.
Yep.
We think about different questions we want to ask. Right.
Departments and yes,
And that engages them in the process.
It'd be very helpful to have you and finance committee have consensus on what is your goal for the FY 24 budget in terms of taxation? What dollars are we working with?
right.
What do you think?
Well, I need to hear from FinCom first personally.
Do we have a thing on liaison?
I thought it was Becky. The chair, I thought, when we did the liaisons, I thought the chair.
What, for FinCom?
I thought it was,
That was discussed. I don't remember that
Maybe
that
we
was a
did.
topic of discussion.
I'm gonna look at what Debbie,
That's a good question.
That was not on the list.
I
Well,
yeah.
remember seeing it.
I don't remember. seeing it.
I know.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
No, I don't, yeah, I don't recall that. I printed that out.
No, maybe I do eat people.
It would be
That
nice.
time
to
of day?
publish
Is it dinner time?
the liaisons and actually- So that
Like,
everybody would see.
I don't know why I just assumed it was.
I seriously thought I thought somebody said it's customary for the board chair to be the liaison. I could have just heard that in my sleep.
no, and
Many boards.
typically do sit on their meetings anyway, on Zoom. So I am happy to do that. So, there we go. We're gonna have to get Debbie to update that list of liaisons. We have about 8 more here, more than that. Okay, this brings us to, I'm sorry, Greg, go
Well,
ahead.
I was looking for the summary.
The summary is, we're going to be looking at the service levels.
Yeah.
To really incorporate a lot of this. And we'll be doing that while we're doing the budget. And if we can get department heads, which they do this anyway, and what separating wheat from chaff. It's all wheat, but you know. What?
Just, sorry, random thing looking at Kathy's suggestions. I don't think it's fair to characterize our budgeting as peanut butter spreading. The individual departments, it isn't easy to keep, and they are constantly looking for ways. It's not that, oh, I got 2.5, I'm gonna spend all of it. Because the finance committee will lean on them hard to say, no, you don't automatically get.
Meant no disrespect, I appreciate that, and I'll be more careful in my phrasing in the future. The reason I use that phrase is because I used it in my discussion with the town accountant. When she described to me how, when after town meeting, how the money gets spread to the various departments. And, not town meeting, excuse me, the initial budget profile, whatever, and she is chartered with meeting with the different town departments to start the budgeting process. I said, is that done based on priorities? So that, you know, certain departments are given more initially, or is it peanut butter spread? If you're given 2.5%, you give everybody 2.5% to start with. And she said, yes. So that's why I used that phrase. I apologize if it was taken in a derogatory manner. It's not what I meant.
Didn't mean to, but.
Yeah, no, I can see just having, you know, I was just typing fast, and so I appreciate that.
All right. So are we, are you,
We're looking at just one.
Just one, is what I heard.
you don't want to use the language about the school district in particular.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I mean, I guess everything is service levels. But we don't get to impose service levels on the school. We get a chance to vote the school budget up or down. And good luck. Suggest directions, but. Would you be happier
I'd
with,
be happy with at least one more.
I mean, I
I think
agree
it's-
with Dan. I think the schools, what we do with the schools is different. We can offer suggestions. Whereas on the town side of the budget, we have more direct oversight.
but what we do have is some ability to negotiate not only with the schools, but also with Essex.
Yeah,
And Essex is in. There's an element in the school budget this year. Part of the way the school budget is divided is the number of students. There are other factors, but the number of students, and it's a rolling average over 3 years. And Manchester's student enrollment is going down a lot.
Yeah.
And that means Essex portion is going up a lot. And that's,
Causing significant heartburn.
yeah.
Oh, right. I'm gonna bring it back, it's 6:05, and this is where, yes, the school's important, there are a lot of important things here. I guess one that kind of stands out a little separately is assessing facilities and updating capital plans accordingly, but do we assess those and update? I mean, is that something that we also get from department heads?
Sorry, could you do?
I'm on page, item number 4, and then 1, 2, 3, the fifth one down on page 2. I just, for me, really, all of this falls.
That really goes.
So that goes into the next one.
Yeah, I forgot to do that.
Okay, so I was just, but
So when you say facilities, that's not relating to school or anything, that's everything.
that's the facility plan number 1 under number 5.
Correct.
May I just make a suggestion with this, Greg, right now for goals? If we can leave it, service levels, but put these other items under it. Because they're, I think it's, without having an idea of what monies are used and what monies might be needed, I have a hard time looking at this and trying to figure out which of those items needs to be prioritized. That's me. Any bit, what does anybody else think?
the thing that's gonna blow the budget up is the schools.
Always.
So I guess a question I would ask is if we have the schools as a separate goal, one thing that which could get 2 different board members tackle this area, right? One with focusing on the schools and another focusing on the rest of the budget. Because we did say we were gonna kind of assign a lead to each one of these.
During the budget process, the schools really don't come in until quite late, and then it comes in as a lump.
And we have a school board liaison right now, which is Ann. And typically the chair is involved. And vice chair. I would say that there was recently the audit was received, correct?
School, yeah.
Is that something that the board would find useful or confusing?
It's not comfortably on reviewing on it. It's not.
Yeah.
This is-
How many pages is it?
I don't remember what that, I'm sure it's,
Out there,
I'm sure it's 50 pages.
yeah.
Is this an audit of the finances, the school system?
Annual
Oh,
audit, just like we do. an annual
School
audit.
system.
Right.
No, school budget,
the
So-
school budget.
school,
I would
school
like-
finance.
This is an accounting, an accounting.
Okay, one at a time. Just because they can't hear us. So with that, do we want to, under maintaining fiscal discipline, have the school be a separate item under there, so that'll be number 2. And I think that's more than one person. I think that's a 2-person job. And I guess I should probably do that as chair with Ann, so that on this one, so you're still liaison, right? But if you and I can identify options. I work on that or no, what do you think?
I think it's important, that someone attend the school committee meetings. And right now, they're just beginning to talk about the budget.
Okay.
I'm happy, if you want to do the finance committee and follow as they develop budget, as they work with the budgets for the other departments.
Okay.
That would be terrific, and when
Excellent.
it gets to the point where serious decisions are being made, I'm certainly involved.
Okay. How's that, Greg?
Works.
Okay, good. All right. So moving on to item number 5, and if we can do this in 10 minutes, we take a 10-minute bio break and then get back here for 6:30. Okay, maintaining infrastructure of the town and ensuring long-term viability of assets. And we need to build a dam around the town.
Those of us who live on the coast would. Which side am I gonna be on?
Good. The inside.
I'm
Anyway,
not.
You're pretty high, you are.
yes.
I'm just glad you qualified that.
On a prominent board even. Okay, so, and this is another one that I found a little. Is this something we look at in conjunction with the climate resiliency measures and what DPW?
Did we discuss this previously? We wrote this out as a separate goal.
Yeah.
Specifically because town residents have concerns about us not maintaining the town infrastructure regardless of climate. And I think that's why we split it up into a separate goal. When I looked at all the information that was collected here, again, I see a lot of just go do's that are great. I don't disagree with any of them. But I think for me, the bulk of it is we need that facilities master plan. Which I believe is already underway, correct?
Just.
So do we know when that might be completed?
Late Richard.
Where are you talking? January, February,
I'm talking early March.
early March, okay. Because really that's, and then I think the only other thing I suggested was, you know, if there are some key big decisions we know we're gonna have to make. There's some things we just know, right, even without the plan. And would we want to start a dialogue to get information, or, you know, there are some key decisions we're gonna have to make, and is there any way we can kind of do some things in parallel rather than wait until the whole plan is
Yeah,
available,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely,
That was-
we can summarize some of
Yeah.
the looming issues.
Exactly, yeah, one of those
Okay.
looming
In
issues.
the order of magnitude numbers we're talking about.
Right, right,
Without getting into the details of the
exactly.
facility.
So those are my top two.
John?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I've got a couple of things. One has to deal with the water. All of these A, B, C, Ds. I agree with all of them. I think that we do need to look at our rate structure in terms of conservation and how we can encourage conservation through the rate structure. And this group will see something on that in the not too distant future, to help reduce consumption, really from an irrigation perspective, not across 5,000 people. Actually, you can do it by just dealing with 120 people, probably.
Probably even fewer than that.
Yes, probably 20. I've looked at the data. So there are a lot of, just a very few number of folks where you can really put a pretty big dent. And we're talking just reducing irrigation maybe by 50% by this, because of the hundreds of thousands of gallons that they use.
Clarifying question.
Sure.
So are we suggesting maybe that we add to our goals in an area to review and approve, we're gonna review those recommendations from
Yes.
the task force and implement as appropriate, that whatever they are, and everything.
Yeah, this will be part of that. There will be
Then there'll a high level-
7 or 8 proposals, all to safeguard the water and or use it more efficiently. This is on the clean side. This study is not dealing with the dirty water side, just the clean
Yeah,
water.
those hydrant flushing pictures. Chuck said.
I was somewhat encouraged. He says about 3 million gallons. I mean, we consume 175, 180 million.
Yeah.
So that's 1%, but if you just say 3 million, people say, well, that's a lot of water. And it is,
Yeah.
but nonetheless. So there's that. The one thing I didn't develop, the number 3, which Greg, I guess you had down here, develop a 20-year large capital need in projects. Right now, I didn't know it doesn't go out that far now. Was it 5, right?
5 plus 10, so we do identify, the 5 years is pretty detailed. And then a few bigger items. within that.
Okay, all right. All right, well, I'm certainly supportive of that initiative, because 5 years is not enough, I think, when you're dealing with capital budgets. The other thing is the DPW. I'd like to get our heads around that. I've seen numbers floating around in terms of moving that DPW costing a ton of money. And I did speak with Chuck about that, I don't know, a few weeks or so ago, and he even said there's been discussion about how that might be done, and you could even disperse the DPW yard into several different places, not necessarily have it in just one. Right now, I guess not all of the DPW is on Pleasant Street. We've got some stuff in Sweeney Park, we've got some stuff over at the water treatment plant perhaps, which could play a bigger role. All of these are possibilities, as well as, of course, the former Black, well, soon to be former Black Grove site. But I think that we really need to get some information. People are asking questions about that, who's including us, because it affects so many other things.
Just a linchpin.
Housing and all the rest of that. And so we really need to have some answers as to how that would roll out.
Yeah, so the wish list, new facility.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's one scenario.
$20+ million project.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Well, we're not deliberating that, but I have a few things to say on that, so.
Brian?
Not at this point, not deliberating.
Ann?
That looks fine.
Okay. This is another big one to wrap my mind around. But I think what would help with this is also information from the master plan regarding facilities. And
There is information, that is,
right.
it's not very detailed.
Okay, so when was the last time we had a complete public facilities master plan then? Okay,
I don't know.
then I
I
think,
don't know if it's ever been done.
and that seems to make a lot of sense. So I would have,
That's a high priority.
I would have that as a very high priority. As well as the capital needs projections. Those are the two that I really felt needed.
Maybe the water task force recommendations.
Oh, under this?
Well, yes, that's what we had discussed, is that a lot of the individual items here are really
Oh, yeah.
implementing the water
Several of them are.
task force.
Well, part of that, when you say, you know, the lost water, there's a large, we don't know where all the pipes are in town. There are a lot, there's a. Yeah,
Yeah.
Wow.
oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah. And so, you know, when we talk about public facilities master plan, that includes that. You know, pipes. So,
Right, we have done that, we have. Master plan for pipe and replacement.
not replacements, I mean, the ones that we don't know about,
Finding the missing.
finding
pipes.
missing
Well,
pipes.
we could put on the back of the milk carton.
But, okay, so those are the two that I think are, and yes, the task force definitely can provide some recommendations to the select board in this department.
So how about review and implement as appropriate the recommendations of the water resource task force? Is that covered? John, what you
Yeah,
discussed?
I think we're not necessarily looking for pipes. I think
Right, I
that,
think you guys are talking about two different things.
yeah, when you say
Yeah,
pipes,
yeah.
what are you talking about?
Well,
If you are talking
Lost
wells,
water.
wells, yes. But
that's a different.
no, that's a different-
So we're talking about different, mine comes under the master plan, the complete facilities thing. What you're talking about is more task force.
yes, that's all, it's all water. Yeah.
And I kind of would like to say review recommendations as opposed to implement.
Yeah,
right?
because it's
Review.
not
review
foregone
recommendation.
recommendation.
Is that sound good?
Yes,
So we have three here.
Right now we have the facilities master plan, the. I'm not sure how you want to phrase this, the developing of the key infrastructure deficiencies, Greg, how do you want to phrase that? Develop plans to address or just kind of. Those,
So the
the big picture, yeah, the things we know about.
Okay.
To develop plans or just. Because there are things we have to make decisions about them, right? All right, okay. And then the third one was review the recommendations of the water resource task force.
Okay. I
I didn't quite understand the second one.
So we have to know. that
All right,
that was
So balanced.
Not that I would.
So there are some big ticket infrastructure things that we know we need to take action on and don't need to wait for the infrastructure facilities master plan, right?
it's sort of a higher level review of the facility master plan.
But we don't want to wait until March.
No, I understand.
So that's what I'm saying.
Right.
We think of another way to
No.
identify key infrastructure deficiencies and review, review key infrastructure deficiencies and develop plans to address.
Review big ticket.
Big ticket capital, whatever language will resonate.
Yeah.
big ticket.
Okay, so now we have 7 minutes before our next meeting starts. And I think at this point, we need to wrap up here. Do we need point people on these, or should we?
I would recommend.
Yes, we need to do that.
Do people volunteer through email or something, or?
Yes, exactly.
Be done through email.
Or under item 5, and then Greg will, Debbie be able to summarize all this and get it back to us?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful.
so we know what we're,
Now, we're not adjourning because we're going to go right into our next meeting, but we're going to take a pause and a bio break. All right. All back here in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Got through everything.
I was kind of surprised.
Oh, that's good.
Over.
I gotta move it so we've got.
Right.
I think you're fine.
I'm glad there's nothing else going on.
Simple list, yeah. Simple list.
How difficult is it to put correspondence on the website?
Good question.
I mean,
It's a long-
no, I mean, when a constituent writes to the board or to you,
email,
email, yes,
yeah,
yeah,
Well, now it was done for 40B.
it's all blue.
done for the 40B, and I heard at the time that that was a major
Major.
challenge. And it was done because it was required.
Well, so that was a judicial, quasi judicial function.
Yeah.
And that's a higher priority. Because it's part of the official record.
Right.
Decision being based on input.
All right, let's see.
So everything, right? And it's all or nothing.
Yeah, it has to be pretty much all or nothing.
And it's fine.
I'm on a bunch of mailing lists. That just keep an archive. And, you know, it's automatic. You can go back through it and find out what somebody thought about a topic 5 years ago. It's just, it's a software thing. You know, it doesn't involve transcribing anything.
No, it involves categories.
Maybe not. Maybe just having it there. People aren't feeling heard. People then, and maybe it would even cut down somewhat on the volume if they could scan over a list and say, oh, yeah, that's already been answered. I know, you know, I don't need to ask this for the 43rd time.
And when you say that, are you saying the email there or the email and what did we do with it?
The email and the responses.
A lot of it, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a response, sometimes it's something that is work in progress. Some of these
We
questions,
ought to say, this is a work in progress. Like,
yeah,
just, I'm sure everybody is on email lists of one sort or another where, you know, everybody gets to see the questions and the answers. And it's a Google list, it's free.
Right, so I guess.
Now, whether it's a good idea or not,
It's excessive to do it for every single piece of paper, every single email. So,
well, it's easier to do for every email than it is to do for some.
someone asked about when is
Yeah, fine, so it goes up there.
selecting meeting.
Yeah.
And I post that.
No, you don't have to post it. There's a conduit for questions. This is, I'm this is not deliberating, this is
No,
trying to
but
figure out some fact. Okay, we're running out of time and
Okay,
I
so here's the well, I mean,
understand that behind it, you may be thinking this is a really bad idea.
I'm just trying to get my arms around it. I'm struggling to do that. So, that would be a lack of, my understanding about what technology could do, to make it easy.
minutes. No, I'm not plugged in, I'm draining the battery. Good evening, Alan. Oh, I'm on the next page.
Sorry, hello, I was muted.
We lost Aaron, but there we are. Great. Everybody's resettled. We have Alan. Good evening, Alan.
Hi, Becky.
Who wants to start off? Okay, Alan.
So, tonight we have for the final approval, the warrant, for the special town meeting for November 14th. And I think two very minor, corrections to it, since I sent it to you yesterday. We call it the Manchester Ethics Middle High School, not just the middle high school. And then we, added, there's other missing English first article, I think, in terms of where the second one. In any other relative, any other changes relative there to the other missing. The motions were updated this today with the correct numbering. And there were again a couple of references to articles that had to be changed, old numbering versus new numbering. Those are all set now as well. So the warrant is in the order that we talked about on Monday night. And so other questions or concerns you had, otherwise I think it's ready for your approval and signature. Yes,
Thank you.
that was very quiet.
Allergies. And forgive me, do we need to? We don't need to decide tonight if we are saying in support of or not. Or do we want, do we do that tonight?
Well, if you want that publicized, then you need to, if you want to publicize with the warrant in the paper, if this is going in the paper next week,
What do we should then?
then you would want to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll say you make your recommendation at the town meeting.
I'm trying to do this.
The town
Right,
meeting.
I think it's. I think it's important to say where we stand. So we can make,
I think residents look to you
yeah,
Yeah,
for guidance. So,
okay. So do we want to go? typically, we see if anybody, if a board member will speak to a specific article. But in this case, the sum for, legal professional services, who would speak to that?
Sorry, can I ask which, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right document. So the document we should be looking at is contract.
So it's the one that had the, yesterday date, the 18th on it?
And the special town meeting warrant.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
No, that's no. Good question. So that we're all on the same page. Get there. Literally. All right, so Article 1, who would that be, who speaks to that? You?
I'm happy to, or if you want to do the information, then you can speak to it. It's your choice.
I think it really doesn't pertain specifically or directly to the planning, I mean, to the select board. I think if you spoke to that, it would make more sense.
That's fine.
Okay,
Happy to do it. Easily done.
and then,
Excuse me, Becky, someone needs to move and second it.
oh, yes. Okay, I will move that. Who wants to second that?
I'll second.
Okay.
Was that Anne?
That was me,
Yeah.
sorry.
Becky will move and Ann will second. Okay, and does the board want to take a stand on this? I'm inclined to support it. Okay, so. Got that, Greg?
Yep.
Okay, Article 2, to see if the town will vote to appropriate.
Excuse me, was that a vote to recommend it?
Yes,
Yeah,
Well, shall we actually vote?
let's take a real vote. Okay, who wants to move to recommend?
You've moved it, I've seconded.
Well, that's moving on, okay. On
Might
the
as well
floor.
do the same.
That's
Keep
different.
it simple.
Do the same.
Keep it simple.
Okay, we'll keep it the same.
And was moving it along.
Okay. Kathy,
Yes.
John,
yes,
Brian,
Yes,
and
Yes.
Becky's yes, so it's unanimous, the board supports. Number 2, to see if, all right, y'all can read it, you don't need me to read it out.
Who is going to speak on Article 1?
Greg,
I will.
Okay,
I think the chief needs to speak on this one, correct? No?
If you will want to.
Yes. But I think it would be appropriate for somebody who is not in the fire department to speak on it at least briefly. Certainly the chief will want to speak to it and
Right,
Sarah Melish will want to speak on it.
Yes.
okay,
So I will be glad to speak on the ambulance apparatus fund.
okay.
is this worded, the way this article is worded, something or nothing may be done, is that correct?
Well,
Something.
something will be done, one or the other is being offered.
Or take any other action relative thereto?
Right now. So that's for an amendment to the article. So someone can make a motion to amend. The motion that
Okay,
the primary motion will be made to appropriate 450,000 from the existing fund for either the rebuilding of the old ambulance or to purchase a new one. The voters are authorizing either option. But someone can move to amend that.
okay. This is not worded such that those are the monies that must be spent, it's not up to, it says the sum of 450.
Well, it is up to you.
Okay, yes, I mean, that's the way I would understand it.
Yes.
Because that's how much it would cost.
Yeah, a new ambulance,
Outside limit.
Right.
right, a rebuild would not cost that
No,
much.
thank you. Okay, so we'll have the chief and Sarah will speak on it and you want to as well.
I would like to speak first, and then the chief can
Okay,
present
so,
his point of view and I will be brief.
Alan, do you have that?
I do. Who is going to move it and second it?
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay, so Ann Harrison to move, Brian Solacey to second. And
Your
roll
recommendation.
call vote as to recommend or not. Kathy Bellata? Yes. John Round,
Yes,
Brian Solacey,
Yes.
Ann Harrison?
Yes.
Yes. Becky says yes as well. Okay. That's a good reference. Okay. And the board unit supports that, Alan. Article 3. This is the
This is
petition.
the petition article. I would assume that the petitioners will move and second it. And they will be the primary speakers. I don't know if one of you want to speak to it.
I think it's appropriate. And I will unless somebody else wants to. So Alan, I will be speaking on for the, say it again,
Article 3.
yes,
Moving on.
you are. Okay,
How is the board recommending on this one?
well, let's take a vote. Kathy, are you in support of this?
No.
John Round,
no,
Brian Solacey,
No.
Ann Harrison?
Yes.
And Becky Jake says no. So the board is not in support, but not unanimously. Yeah.
Okay,
Now, for all the articles, for the planning board, do you want to go through each of these separately?
Yes.
Um,
In terms of your recommendations.
Yep.
You need that. I'm assuming it'll be
Okay.
planning board members who move in second and do the explanations.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
what's really to focus on is whether that,
whether we support them or
whether
not.
it's.
Okay. So Article 1 is. Becky, can I just say a word or two? Absolutely.
Thank you. Just, I wanted to thank you,
Sarah Creighton,
both Sarah Creighton from the Vice Chair of the Planning Board. Thank you for advancing these articles on the town meeting warrant. I think I just want to remind everybody that the purpose was asked by the town and monies were appropriated to clarify our zoning and to try to update it. There are a couple of rumors that I want to just take 1 minute or 2 minutes to dispel. And that is, there's a rumor that we are allowing a whole bunch of things by right.
Yeah.
And that is not accurate. There is a single provision in the proposed changes that allows up to 20 small, under 900 square feet, accessory units annually by right if they meet certain stringent requirements. That's the only additional by right. We actually did remove the other night a provision in the section 4 for swimming pools by right. And so they will remain by special permit as they currently are now.
Okay.
So that's a very important thing. This is not also
so the ADUs is the only change.
only by right change, correct? Everything else that we are suggesting is by special permit.
Right.
And the section 6 strengthens our special permit purview by using best practices that are used across many other communities for performance standard rather than prescriptive standard, and we've tightened a number of things. Are they perfect? No. But we believe that they are clearer and are more, give the special permit granting authority, which in most cases for these things is the planning board, and gives us greater latitude to protect the kinds of things that are important to the town and to town character. So this is not any kind of developer giveaway. In fact, it's quite the contrary. It gives us the opportunity to regulate special permits and large developments, which we can foresee in a more clear, concise, and performance-based standard that I think will really be a good thing.
If I could just check, so the only additional use allowed by special permit is the senior housing.
Correct. The second thing I was gonna make is the only additional new use allowed by special permit is senior housing. And that is by special permit with a whole bunch of provisions. The other proposed change is to residential conservation clusters. Clarify that a second. An additional proposed change, residential conservation cluster, basically to remove the requirement for 5 acres as a minimum. But if you have,
Currently already allowed.
but they're
by special
currently
permit.
allowed by special permit.
So
And this requirement says if you have 4 houses, you have to have the minimum of a lots allowed, the area allowed by 4 houses in that district. So we're not increasing density, except if you have affordability or a significant amount of additional open space or other town amenities. And we've taken out the fact that you could pay a fee in lieu of actually doing something. So we're strengthening the benefit to the community, to the town in those things that we say we want. The last proposed change is to take out the outdated if the existing ADU bylaw were to stand, we've proposed to take out the antiquated requirement of a 1984 house prior to 1984 and a double lot size. But we hope and anticipate that the proposed article, they're all renumbered, I used to know them by heart, third to the last, whatever that is, ADU bylaw, and we hope he will 13 and 14. So I think the notion that we are stripping away permitting procedures is nonsense. We are actually proposing stronger regulations, and by moving stormwater at the request of the DPW, we've strengthened the stormwater regulations, and we've made broader applicability by going to the general bylaws. So I think except for those cases that we've talked about, that we actually are strengthening. So hopefully that helps to allay fears, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go through this.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And I know some of that sounded a little Greek to some people in terms of the significance of a house built before 1984, the size of a lot, but that's.
So Article 15 would be passed over. If Article 14 passed.
Correct.
Okay. And Sarah, so you all will move, the board won't be speaking.
Right. Well, we welcome your support and if
Absolutely.
you would like to speak in support of them, we can have it.
I guess just a question for Al. Should Article 15 have that proviso in the warrant that it would be passed over if Article 14 is approved? You're on mute.
Nope.
There's no reason that it couldn't, and I think it would help to avoid confusion to put it in there.
I think it would help.
Yeah, that's.
I do too.
Yeah, okay.
I would just add
Yeah,
that.
where?
Um,
You get parentheses?
I would say right up front, if Article 14 fails, to see if the town will modify the zoning. If Article 14 fails,
Right, otherwise pass over.
Right.
Otherwise move to pass over,
I guess we can do it parenthetically at the bottom.
right?
Yeah, I would do it as a parenthetical at the bottom.
Yeah, okay.
At the bottom,
At the end of the
At
article.
the end of that article.
Just at
at the end of
the
14,
end of 15.
After or take any other action relative thereto,
all right,
a parenthetical that says, if Article 14 is approved, Article 15, the planning board will move to pass over Article 15.
okay.
Thank you, sorry, I should have.
I guess what we do is, go through these to see.
Can I just ask the procedure, Alan, would it be okay if I sent you an email or, and Greg, tomorrow about who will move second and speak?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
If you do it tomorrow, Sarah, that would be the earliest I've ever gotten those things.
Yeah.
Oh,
You'd be way ahead of schedule.
well, we may, okay.
You can have a weekend if you like.
Guessing that our board will want to. Opine on that.
Yes.
If I have that within a few days, it'll still be the earliest ever.
Oh, goody.
Okay, article number 4. Has everybody had a chance to read that? Any questions about it? Okay, motion to support.
Second,
Okay, so moved by Ann Harrison, seconded by John Round, roll call vote. Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Round,
yes.
Brian Solacey,
Yes.
Ann Harrison,
Yes,
Becky Jake says yes, unanimous. Article 5,
So move.
thank you.
Second.
Okay, moved by John Round, seconded Kathy Bellata, roll call vote, Ann Harrison,
yes,
John Round,
Yes.
Brian Solacey,
Yes.
Kathy Bellata. Yes. And Becky Jake says yes, unanimous. I think thought I moved the chairs again. Okay, Article 6,
So
second,
okay, moved by Brian, seconded by Ann Harrison. Roll call vote, Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Round.
Yes.
Brian Solacey.
yes.
Ann Harrison.
yes,
Becky Jake says yes, unanimous. Article 7,
Becky, if I could just suggest, if unless there are articles that the board may not unanimously recommend, you could probably take them in one vote.
okay, well, that's what I was wondering initially, but okay, thank you. Is there any article that any board member would like to take out of approving?
I have a question
Yes.
on the ADU, Sarah. Do these ADUs count as housing units when we're trying to assess whether or not we are achieving a 10% affordable housing inventory? Do ADUs count as general housing?
So do they add a base, it's not a number to
They
the base?
they increase the base.
Yes.
They do.
Yeah.
Then I'm not supporting this particular.
Okay, where is that? Okay.
So the only thing, can I just
Number 14.
on to that?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that the having served on the master planning committee is that the town, I think, wants to 3 things on housing, at least in the surveys that the master plan, you know, with all of the flaws of survey, that the master plan surveys received fairly significant participation for surveys. They want affordable housing to, but they also want lower cost housing. And they want senior housing, and they want town character. Those are the key pieces. And so small ADUs, 900 square feet, which is the size of this room, maybe a little, no, probably no, bigger than this room, but
Not
little
much,
bigger than this room,
not
not much. In an existing dwelling, contribute to the lower cost housing that people are interested in having. So,
Yeah, absolutely support the concept of ADUs, I just don't support it the way it's written. The by right is something that I'm concerned about, and the number 20, because, and I, my preference would, and this is not a new, issue I've raised, but my preference would have been to start a little bit slower to see what the demand is. Because for every 20 ADUs we add 2 more affordable units that we have to add to our base in order to protect ourselves from 40Bs. So that it's just, I support ADUs. I can't
Okay,
get past
so
this particular one.
we'll take that one out, and all other articles, meaning 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, and 16. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, moved by Ann Harrison, seconded by Brian Solacey. Roll call vote. Ann Harrison,
Yes.
Brian Solacey,
Yes.
John Round,
Yes,
Kathy Bellata.
yes.
And Becky Jake says yes, so the rest are unanimous. And then Article 14. May I have a motion to approve Article 14? For
So-
support?
so moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by John Round, seconded by Ann Harrison. Ann Harrison,
Yes.
Brian Solacey,
No.
John Round,
Yes,
Kathy Bellata. And Becky Jake says yes, so we have support of the board, 3 full in support, 2 not.
Thank you very much. Can I also just add that one of the things that on that ADU that I think is really important to know is that this has been batted around for a long time, so I think it's a good opportunity to bring it to town meeting,
Yeah.
regardless of how it happens, and I think that and we should bring it in, and that we should respect the fact that people have differences of opinion on the topic.
I fully support bringing it to town meeting.
So I appreciate your-
You've done wonderful work, all of it.
And I think we're better, the emotions are stronger for having waited for.
Yeah.
Because that has been, but I appreciate it, thank you.
And I do think that it is reasonable for the board to speak. If somebody would like to speak for all the articles except 14. In the beginning, just saying that the board is unanimous in its support.
Maybe, if I could suggest maybe having somebody speak to the administrative stuff, which is through, through, I don't even know what number it is anymore. Most of it, and the clarity that this brings to, and the strengthening of the bylaw, and, as I said, it's not perfect. We can continue to adjust as we have been incrementally over the last more than a year. But it is getting a long way toward the goals of the master plan, fulfilling the request for spending money on consultants and actually getting something to the finish line, so.
It's huge. Thank you.
but
So-
I may ask.
Please.
Yeah, I had a question. So the ADUs, everything else is pretty much by permit as it was before. Well,
Yeah.
the senior thing didn't exist, the
Right.
residential. Yeah, and that included ADUs, although it had a bunch of other caveats as well, which you got rid of.
ADUs under 900 square feet would
Right.
be by right, which is very small
And so
and it's
that's
very unusual, but those over 900 square feet would be by special permit, but if you read it, it says up to 1,200 square feet. So the ADU provision now has a cap, a large, the other, I should clarify.
The key to my question is, I wonder why you decided to not make that by permit or under 900 when, I mean, historically it was that way, and there were other problems, which is why mine got built. But
Well, there are a couple things, we've added a bunch of regulations to try to create some sort of oversight, to have them be owner occupied and some oversight with a certificate that we can write some regulations around. So that was one goal, was to create a little bit of oversight for those that exist out there to make sure that that they're not Airbnbs and that kind of thing. The other thing is that there is a provision in chapter 40A, trying to encourage ADUs by right under 900 square feet, or 50% of the
50% of the total
housing
square
area,
feet.
not more than 50% of the house's area, whichever is smaller. And that second part didn't make it into this proposed change for whatever reason. And so there was a group that worked together predating me on the planning board that proposed this, and I think it included people from the housing group and others. And so it was sort of following that broader policy effort, and that's why the 900 square feet came about. So
But the by right thing, you
900
inherited
square
that.
feet by right.
Yes,
is the
in other
48
words, that was
requirement.
kind of the history.
Yeah, I think that's how it actually existed before I came on the board as a draft. And I know that a group beyond the planning board came up with that draft. So back to my earlier point, I think this thing has been floating around there for a while with a lot of different people touching it. So it's a great thing to bring to town meeting and have some debate, respect people's differences of opinion on the various aspects of this, and
Well, I'm curious, because I've had questions about that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had a ton, more than I have.
but
All of these articles require a 2/3 vote.
yes.
I do have one question before we.
Except for the general bylaws, modifying the general bylaws is 50%.
So the simple answer to that question is that the first 5 articles are all simple majority votes. And all the remaining ones are 2/3, except for the one that would be passed over if the previous article were adopted, and that's a majority vote to pass over.
I think the general bylaws, article, I don't know what number it is now. Is
It's number 5.
number 5, but number 4 requires 2/3
No,
to amend the zoning bylaws by deleting sections 1, 2, 3, 4.
oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wish.
So, no input on what is provided to the voters as they enter town meeting.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that we have a booklet that contains the warrant.
Yep.
With your recommendations and the FinCom recommendations.
Yep.
The,
The FinCom has voted to take no action on all of those.
This was great. You know, that, something like that,
well, so I actually think the slideshow,
yes.
I'll probably delete all the bios on all of you, but.
Okay, yeah.
No offense intended, I think there's a nice bios. Anyways, so I have that and then have all the motion with the
Yeah,
line item numbers. So everyone has
yes.
everything in one booklet.
Yeah.
And Alan and I have talked about having the line item numbers for each motion will help to navigate people. And I thought maybe we put if we could, like a color, ideally a colored piece of paper for, as a divider in each. Just, I don't know if we can, it may add to the cost and logistics, or at least I have a couple ideas of how we can make it as readable, at least a blank page that says Article 2,
Right,
Article 1,
yes, certainly. do that.
something that says, and they are all, thank you, Debbie, for updating. They're all dated and paginated with line numbers. Yeah, on the line numbers is a toggle on and off thing. So, and we have confirmed that we've met all the public meeting requirements and notification of all that stuff.
So for a board member to speak, does anybody have a burning desire to do so?
No.
then I will go ahead and just to the beginning one, right? It's your face just fell.
No, no. I think
Oh,
you-
I
I think any of you should jump up at any time when you feel motivated to respond to a question or a comment.
Mhm.
Okay,
Or-
okay.
I'm happy to provide, I'm happy to help you with talking points. If you're going to support the, any of them individually, so you can be in touch with me and I can help you with talking points.
Okay,
I think it would be helpful.
we would need to let Alan know. If a board member is going to be speaking.
And just put up-
Or you can raise your hand.
Raise their hands, okay. Speaking of speaking,
But Becky, excuse me, did I understand that you're gonna speak for the board at the beginning of the zoning articles on all of them?
I was, but I think now I'm not.
No, I think that's a good idea.
That's good.
Oh,
I
okay,
would stick to that.
okay,
I think that's fine.
Former planning board.
okay, yes, Sarah will chat over a big cup of coffee. And then Article 1, Greg, thinking a little bit more of that, I think it would be good for a select board member to speak to that. And I think it would be one of us who went through the process, the friendly 40B process. Because there are some assertions that are very incorrect about why we need this money. So, John?
I will do that, and
Okay,
I'll chat with you about some of the details.
That's fine.
and so Alan, we are changing number 1, Article 1 from Greg speaking on that to John Round speaking.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's a bit more important if that's,
Fine,
okay,
I agree.
okay.
I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah,
No offense to Greg.
yeah. A lot of people don't even realize that this is starting, it'll cost some money.
It's going to cost money and it didn't get here because of a lack of
Foresight, planning. Clarity.
It happens when people throw up roadblocks to good planning. Without understanding. There we go.
I have one other issue related to town meeting.
Yes,
And I'm speaking for myself, but I'm happy to take this to the planning board if you, depending on your thoughts. Helene Quasi was our administrator for 25 years.
Yes.
And there has been no recognition of her retirement. I think, was it you and I that mentioned, maybe just an acknowledgement of it at the start of the town meeting would be one option. Or if not, then perhaps we can coordinate among our two boards for something else that's perhaps more appropriate. I'm not sure town meeting is the best place and or that you want to get in the habit of that. That's the other piece that, if you do it for one, you got to do it for others. So I'll leave it to you to think about
okay.
and to let us know what you want to do. But whether it's town meeting or some other time, I think her contributions to the town have been really significant as a employee and she retired during COVID and we kind of.
Could we consider doing that at the annual town meeting?
I think we could consider doing it at any time.
Can I just weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think,
Alan,
I mean,
I can remember 25 years ago when Charlotte chaired the planning board and Helene would arrive at our house on Saturday morning delivering the latest papers needed for the next meeting. And I totally agree that she has been a star and deserves a lot of recognition. I tried to avoid doing those kinds of things at town meeting because it is our legislature and I think it ought to be pretty much limited to the town's legislative business.
Yeah.
But I'm all in favor of honoring Helene.
I think that's fine too. I totally respect that because I also think if you do that for one, You know, if I retire from the planning board after 1 year, do I get to go to town meeting?
It's, yeah, what is the president said.
Yeah, that's fine. So let's put that on our list to at least coordinate with
Figure out.
at some other time. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, great. All set. Thank you
Carol,
very
thank
much.
you very much. Christina's on. Thank you, Christina. Alan, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we'll all chat soon. We have a motion to adjourn unless we have any, that's
I'm sure we'll be chatting early and often, as they say in Chicago.
early and often, and that would be a good thing. All right.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Alan. Bye.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Good. Roll call vote. Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Round.
Yes.
Brian Solacey. And Harrison. Yes. Becky Jakes says yes. The done deal. Good night, everybody.
Deal.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
You're okay with signing your signature page?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to. All right, how do I stop this meeting now? Oh, there we go.